Finally, we're going to tackle this location detail view that's been driving me nuts all project. We're going to break this up into two phases and two videos as well. The first phase is similar to what we've been doing with the other views. Some of those changes that we've been doing to all the views, like wrapping the view model in an extension and small optimizations. And then in the second video, we're going to tackle like the big refactor, restructuring the screen. So let's get to those changes that we've been doing on all screens. So that is our location detail view model. Here, we're going to wrap this in an extension, right? Just like we've been doing location detail view. And do some code folding here. Again, I should be doing this way more often than I do. Got to get in the habit of that. Now, our location detail view model is within our location detail view. Again, that's that extra safety. Scroll down, make sure I didn't like mess anything up. Looks like we're good there. Okay, so that's part one. Now we want to do our private, file private little mini audit. So let's look on our functions here, determine the columns. I need that outside, get directions I'm pretty sure I need all of these, right? You really are looking for things that are only used within this file, like these, show and hide loading view, right? Those are private. Okay, so we're good there. Let's go to our location detail view, see if we're using, I know we have a bunch of views down here, right? Yeah, all these structs, right? All these mini views that we took out. Oh, okay, so that messed up our preview. So now we just need to do location detail view dot location detail view model. While we're here, we're going to clean up these previews because remember, this was our accessibility stuff. We want to get rid of all that. We're not worried about accessibility anymore at this point. Of course, if you wanted to keep that there, you could, but I'm going to go back to our regular preview, do a Command B. That should solve all of our problems. Other stuff failed. What is going on? Oh yeah, it's because we're passing in this detail view model when we're initializing the location detail view, just like we've done before. So I'm going to hit the little X. Go back to that. And I would have to type location detail view dot. Now, here's the thing. This is starting to get a little out of hand, for at least what I like, having this location detail view dot. So again, it's all about the trade-offs on the safety that you get. So in this example, we're going to go back, and I'm doing this to show you kind of how out of control that would have gotten. Our call sites would have been even more messy and even more hard to read, like anytime we use this. So to me, the little extra safety of wrapping the view model in our extension isn't worth typing out location detail view dot location detail view model everywhere, because that's a super long line of code, right? So you have to look at the trade-offs. And again, developers value pros and cons differently. So for example, I value code readability very highly. So anything that takes away from code readability, I got to make sure it's really, really worth it. And like I said, I don't think the little extra safety of wrapping this in extension is worth that downgrade in readability. But that's just my opinion. But that's why I'm not going to wrap this one in a extension. So let's go back to our location detail view model. I'm just going to Command Z as much as I can. That'll take me back to basically when I first opened the file, like nothing ever happened. Do a Command B. I believe our location detail view preview is still, nope, I guess I must have undid that. So Command B, we should be good. I just basically undid that. But I wanted to walk through that example just to show you that sometimes, this little extra bit of safety might not be worth it. So we're not going to do that here. Now back to my file private audit. Again, all these are going to be file private. And I'm going to copy that because we're going to paste space. Basically all these little views, which we're going to be adding more of, spoiler alert, I'm going to add file private because again, they are unique to these views. In a future video though, right? So here's this style that we've gone with, right? All these little structs, all these little views that are reusable, right? In a future video, I'm going to talk about, I think I'm calling the video other points of view, because again, there's various styles, and I'm not saying my style, my opinions are correct and the only way to do it. So in that video, I'm going to show you other ways to do it. And here I am getting ahead of myself a little bit, but just a little teaser, right? Some people prefer to make these little views variables on the main view. Our main view just has var body sum view. Well, some developers will have var, and they'll name it whatever we named it here. So there'll be a bunch of variables on that main view amongst the body. In that video, we're going to explore that. I'm going to talk to you about why I don't like that method and like my method, and talk about the pros and cons and the trade-offs. So that is coming. But anyway, back to the style we've been using. We have these little reusable views here, but we're marking them file private, so they can only be reused within this file. So let me go down to the bottom. Yep, I did it. And then again, I like 2 vertical spaces in between them. It just makes it breathe a little bit, especially when the font is zoomed to a normal size when you might be developing and not recording a video. I think it makes it look less scrunched up. So back to my blown up recording size for you all. After the file private and private audit, we want to clear up this alert, right? So we can delete this. Again, this is the stuff we've been doing on all videos. $alert, close the curly brace, and we're good to go there. It really cleans that up. Okay, so now let's start talking about the view specific optimizations. So there's two big things that I want to do on this view. As of right now, when we tap the checkout, we're not really giving the user any feedback. We're automatically checking them out or checking them in, and then their avatar pops up. On a great network connection, that works fine, right? Because the avatar pops up almost instantaneously. However, on a bad network connection, it could take a long time. They're not getting any feedback. Maybe they start tapping the button again. It can get all clunky, and we want to handle that. So what I'm going to do is when they tap the button, I'm going to pop up the loading screen that we have on our avatars. And then when it's successful, the loading screen goes away and they see their avatar. But they get that feedback to let them know they've been successfully checked in. And we're also going to change our haptic to when that success occurs. Again, more reinforcement. Hey, you've been checked in successfully. And I know that goes against what I said when we implemented the haptic, when I said I want it to be when they tap the button. But upon thinking about it more and doing more research into it, a good example is if you've ever used Apple Pay, like when you scan your face or your thumbprint and it pays and it's confirmed, then you get the haptic, right? The ding, and then the haptic that plays. So it is better to use the haptic, to confirm the success. So again, we are going to play our haptic when our checked in is actually successful, not when they tap the button. So those are the two main changes, and we'll do some smaller stuff, but let's start implementing those. So go to the location detail view model. Let's go to our update checked in status function here. So when this function starts, which is right here, I can do show loading view, because we've already, that's by the way, that's this function down here that we built a while ago for other stuff. So we're going to show the loading view there. I went past it here. When this update checked in status starts, and then we got to make sure we hide it when we're done here, either when the save is done, so we do it here, hide loading view, but also, right, just in case this first success case, this initial fetch record, if that fails, we also need to hide the loading view in that failure as well. And then just to clear it up, in this one where we're saving the record, whether it's success or failure, we want to hide the loading view. So that's why we're doing that. Now, we also want to disable the button while we're loading. And while we're loading up here up top, right, we have this is loading. So while is loading equals true, that's during the loading, right? We're flipping that to false when we're done loading. So let's go back to our location detail view onto our check out, check in button, which is this button right here, which we're going to clean up in the refactor as well. So on our button right here, this bottom curly brace here, let me move it up. We have a property called disabled, which you can set to true or false. So we want this to be disabled if it's view model dot is loading. So when view model is loading is true, this button is going to be disabled. When view model dot is loading is false, it will be enabled. Again, this prevents people from just like spamming the button. Maybe maybe it takes 10 seconds to check in, check out. Maybe it's horrible network. Well, this way they're spamming the button. We're not firing off more network calls, right? The button is disabled while we're loading. Okay, so let's talk about this haptic now. As you can see, we're playing this haptic as soon as the button is tapped. Remember, we don't want to do that. We want to do that in the success case. So let's delete this. And in our location detail view model here, back down to our update check-in status, we want to play this in the success case, right? Once we've saved the record, whether they're checking in or checking out, we want to play that. So I will put that right here, except we can't do just play haptic, because remember, we put that on an extension on our view. So we'll go to that real quick. Utilities, extension, and our view extension here, right? We have this play haptic. Well, that means any view can do that. Well, we're going to actually want to move our haptic to our view models because we're going to be doing them on the success of a network call. And I said view models plural because if you remember on our profile screen, we also have that checkout button. So we want to implement that same behavior on the profile screen as well, which we'll get to in the profile video. But what that means is I can't have this as an extension on a view. So I'm going to need some object that holds our haptic. Now, I could also just put this function on each view model itself, and that's fine. However, something like haptics, I'm going to cut this and get rid of this here while I talk. Something like haptics, you can see you're going to expand upon them. As your app grows and evolves, you may make more use of haptics. And right now, we're just using the success haptic. Maybe you eventually want to implement like the warning or the error haptic or create your own haptic. So something like haptics makes sense to have its own like haptic manager that can be used anywhere. So we're going to create that here up in our managers. And by the way, this whole like manager naming thing, some people don't like that. I just find it makes sense to me. You can call it something else, but I'm going to stick with that naming scheme. So we're going to go Swift file, hit next, call this haptic manager, hit create. Cool, we're gonna need UI kit because it's a UI feedback generator. So UI kit, we'll call this a struct haptic manager. And I'm going to paste in that function there, except this needs to be a static function. That way we don't have to initialize a new haptic manager every time. And then this is why I needed UI kit, because it's a UI notification feedback generator. So now I can just call haptic manager.play haptic. And actually, I'm not going to say play haptic. I'm going to say play success. Because again, you can have the warning haptic, right? Look at this dot right here. We have dot success. You can have dot error, success, warning. And again, you can create your own haptics. So you can imagine having something like a haptic manager makes sense for a project because, again, the project is going to grow and evolve. You may use them more, even though right now we just have play success. Okay, so now that we have that set up, let's go back to our location detail view model. So again, in this success case for when we successfully save a record after we check in and check out, I want to do haptic manager.play success. And again, we'll be doing something similar in the profile view when we get that, but that handles the haptic here. Okay, so let's run this and test this. Now we should see when we're checking it, what did I mess up? Is it a preview somewhere? Oh, cannot find play haptic in scope. Again, we're in our profile view here. It's because, yeah, I deleted that, right? I don't want to fix the profile view yet. We'll save that for the profile view video. But anyway, back to the location detail view model. Let's run this. Okay, so if I go to a location, we'll go to Chipotle. Now when I tap check in, I should see a little loading spinner, and the button will also be disabled while this is happening. So check in, see the loading spinner. There we go, there's my name. I'll check out and whoops, my internet connection is pretty fast, but trust me, as I'm doing this, like I can't spam the button, right? I can only tap the button when the loading has finished, right? Again, prevents multiple network calls being fired off as they're spamming the button. And then the haptic, you're gonna have to test on your own device. I obviously can't do that on a simulator. Okay, so that is working. So we'll stop running this, get back to the code. Okay, now for some small cleanup stuff. So I can write this a little better. This is where we are, flipping our is checked in based on what we were before, right? If we were checked in, now we want to flip it to checked out. Well, I can just do is checked in dot toggle to toggle the Boolean. And I believe toggle was new in like Swift 4.2, maybe Swift 5. I don't know. It's relatively recent that we can do dot toggle, and that is a nice thing. Because again, on the success case, if it was successful, whether I checked in or checked out, I just want to flip the toggle to the opposite of what we were. Okay, moving on down to the bottom here. I'm going to get rid of my bottom thing. Okay, so this function here that we wrote, show profile, DDG profile, I want to talk about these argument labels a little bit. So the way I typically do things is if the type, our DDG profile, is very explicit and you know what it is, I will typically omit this argument label in the beginning. So you do an underscore there. Now you still need this profile so you know how to use it within the scope of your function, right? We're using it there. But what this means is when we call it, we don't have to have that profile argument label. So it will read show profile in size category. Because right now, if I go to my location detail view, it should give me an error where I'm using this down here, right? So you see it's viewModel.show profile in size category. Well, by deleting that argument label, I can do just show profile in size category. And that's much more readable, right? Instead of saying viewModel.show profile, just show profile in size category. Now, this is actually a recent change, I think, in what they did, because like I said, I only used to do this if it was very explicit. Because watch when I get the autocomplete. So viewModel.show. When I get the autocomplete, it used to not have this argument label. It used to just say DDG profile. And to me, that was clear. Like, oh, okay, I need to put a DDG profile in here. However, sometimes it's not always clear. Like sometimes it's just a string or an int. So you're not sure what goes there. So that's when I would use the argument label. However, it appears that even if you omit the argument label, it puts in the one that you put in there. So even if this was a string and maybe I wanted this to say name, it would still show name string. Whereas again, it used to just say string and it wasn't clear. So again, this is an example of how Swift is constantly evolving and old habits you may have may not be applicable anymore because they've updated things. So now I guess even if this was a vague string or int, you could get away with omitting that first argument label because the autocomplete is going to tell you what's up, it appears. So again, a little explanation on that, but cleaning that up makes it a little more readable, right? View model, show profile in size category. Basically a sentence. Okay, so that wraps up the small changes. Again, we're going to come back and refactor this whole screen in another video, but the small optimizations and changes are done on the location detail view. Let's go to the profile modal view. I'll actually pull up the canvas in the preview for this one. One thing I didn't account for was the first and last name and the company name being super long. So let's go to our mock data here in our profile. So I guess that's over in the mock data, which is in our model, mock data. So instead of test user, I'm going to say super long first name. and then super long last name Junior. I don't know. And then best company ever would be, you know, super long company name incorporated or whatever, right? Just to test like something super long. So now let's go back to our profile modal view and hit resume here. We should see our preview update to our super long name. Okay, cool. There's no padding. It just goes right up to the edge of our container here. So I want to add some horizontal padding to both our company name and our first and last name. So we'll do padding. And then again, I don't want top and bottom padding. I just want dot horizontal, right? That's just the leading and the trailing edges. So we'll copy that and also put that on the company name, hit resume, and then we should see, yes, now we have padding. You see our text shrunk to fit as much as possible before it truncated. So again, these are like ridiculously long names. If you wanted to go the extra mile, you could have it like wrap and adjust your view. I think this is fine because, you know, those names are like insanely long for us. So small little fix there. And then one last little thing on the location detail view that I forgot, if we go to the location detail view, is let's get rid of the preview because I'm gonna have to run this to show you. We have this spacer down at the bottom right here of our VStack. Let me show you this in action. We're just gonna delete it, spoiler alert, so it's not a huge major change, but it's the bottom of our avatar view has a little space, right? Like watch when I scroll down, see the jobs name and the jobs avatar. You see that little space right above the tab bar? That's because we have that spacer there. And I think that was because from when we were building it. So we can simply delete that spacer and run it on the iPhone 12 Pro just to verify and show you the new behavior that we'll get. Back to Chipotle. So now, let me go back so I can get my tab bar. That was the modal that pops up. Chipotle. Okay, now when I scroll down, you see there's no space there. It goes all the way to the tab bar, which especially if we had a super long list, that is the behavior we want. So small cleanup there. But again, that handles the small optimizations, the cleanup. In the next video, we're gonna tackle the big refactor to just restructure this beast. All right, let's do it. All right, let's talk about our plan of attack on how to refactor this. So the first phase here, I'm gonna go through and take care of the quick wins, the easy wins, the low-hanging fruit, whatever you wanna call it. And that is things like, you know, if I scroll down here, right, like this who's here text. Anything with like a ton of modifiers, we're gonna refactor out. Those are the quick and easy wins, right? So that's an example. Maybe this nobody's here text is an example. Working on our first name avatar view, that's a good example. You know, this black transparent background for our modal, that's a good example. So going through, handling those quick wins, and when that's done, take a step back, reassess the situation, and move forward. Okay, so back up to the top, we'll scroll down. The first quick win is going to be this who's here text. Now, this is a little bit interesting because our accessibility label is relying on a view model for the count. So we're gonna have to pass in that number to our text, right? And it doesn't show in the UI, but it's what our accessibility says. Remember, we say, you know, who's here? 5 checked in. That's the voiceover UX we wanted to go for. So I'm going to command click on text, extract subview, and we'll name this grid header text view. And I didn't name it who's here text view because you never know, that may change, right? And we may change the title of that, but this is always going to be like the grid header, right, of our avatars. Maybe you could say avatar grid header, whatever you want. But this is also going to take in a number, and that will be an int, right? Because we want to have it say, you know, how many people are here. So if I go down to our extracted subview, which is at the bottom here, this grid header text view, and you see when I renamed it up there, it automatically renamed it down here. Now I do need a var number of an int, turn there, and then now instead of, you know, a view model checked in profiles.count, this is just number, right? Whatever number we pass in is what number we're going to say. So there is our grid header text view, and again, this is file private. And once we're done extracting all our subviews, I'm gonna put all these views in kind of like top to bottom order, right? Like banner image view should be at the top, address view, then description view. Right now they're kind of all mixed up. We're gonna save that for the end, just so you know that's coming. So back up to our grid header text view right here, right? So this int that we wanna pass in is the view model.checkedInprofiles.count. All right, that's quick win number 1. Quick win number 2, this nobody's here text. So command click on that text. Again, extract subview. And then here, I'm gonna call this grid empty state text view. Now, of course, if you did take your empty state further and you had some nice illustrations, graphics, whatever, you know, you would encapsulate that in here as well. So now scroll down to the bottom, should be my grid empty state text view. Again, that automatic renaming. We don't have to do anything here. I'm going to make a little space just to keep with my formatting. And again, 2 vertical spaces, make it file private, and we're good. So now back up to the top, or not to the top, but to where we are here, grid header text view, grid empty state view. Now let's talk about this first name avatar view, because I contemplated, let's go back to our custom views, right? We just have this avatar view, right? Which has just the image, not the first name. So our avatar first name view and our avatar view are very similar. Again, just one includes the first name. So what you could potentially do is, pass in a profile to the avatar view and then maybe a Boolean like show first name or something like that. And then based on that Boolean, you have the text down here in a VStack below the image that also shows the first name, which would be our first name avatar view. Back here, let's go down here. I think it's right here. Nope, right here, right? Where you have, the image for the avatar view and then the text. So I explored that. However, it became a little more complicated because we have this very specific accessibility stuff on this screen. Now, of course, I don't have to put the accessibility stuff in the first name avatar view, right? I can leave it out here. But again, I really want to clean up this screen. So it's important to me, and again, purely subjective, my opinion, to abstract away all this accessibility stuff. So because I want to abstract all this away, I'm going to keep our first name avatar view separate from our avatar view. That way this looks a lot cleaner here. And again, this tap gesture can be one line to make it even more clean. And we talked about the one-liners are subjective, but I think that is a pretty good place to do it. And then now I can go to my first name avatar view and on the VStack here, put those accessibility modifiers. So that is all abstracted away here. Because if you remember on this button, we wanted to say shows Sean's profile pop-up. And that is only pertinent to this screen, not every avatar view. Okay, scrolling back up to where we were, let's talk about the next quick win. Okay, so here we are, yep, first name avatar view. We got those accessibility modifiers out of there. Okay, so this view is another quick win, right? So I'm gonna command click on the color, extract subview, and I called this one full screen black transparency view, just to be very explicit here. And scroll down to the bottom. I don't think we need to do anything here other than our spacing, our file private, and then full screen transparency view. I do want to clean up this comment of the transition. Remember we talked about that little issue with SwiftUI. Give our little spacing here. But yeah, there's nothing that's conditional here, right? We always want to hide it no matter what from accessibility. And then one more quick little win here. If I scroll back up to where we are, these animations on our profile modal view, I can abstract away onto the profile modal view itself. That way our two views here are pretty straightforward, right? If we're showing a profile modal, we're showing a full screen black transparency view and our modal view. So let me go to the profile modal view. And then on the overall Z stack here, right, which is the whole view, like I'll even do some code folding, right, that I got to get better at. We'll put the modifier on it of the transition. Let me uncode fold this now because I don't think the alignment is right with that. Yeah, I guess it is. So we can put that on the overall Z stack itself and it still gets that. So let's run our detail screen to make sure our animation is still working. We didn't break anything. It should still look the same. Okay, locations, go to Chipotle. Cool, everything's still working fine. Click on Sean, there's our animation. We can still dismiss it. Cool, we didn't break anything, or everything looks the same. We're still good to go. So stop running this, and that wraps up our quick wins here. So now we're gonna focus on restructuring like the screen. I'm on the wrong screen, location detail view. I thought I was gonna get that. Now we're gonna talk about, restructuring a lot of this stuff. Let's reassess the situation top to bottom. I'm just gonna do a quick pass and talk about how we're gonna do it, right? So our banner image view is pretty much as abstract as it can get. This little H stack on the address view, we can fix that, right? Because this address view is only getting used on this screen. So I can kind of bundle that H stack into this overall address view. Again, if we were using this little address somewhere else, maybe we couldn't do this. Description view is abstracted as it can get. Now, the problem child, right? This H stack of buttons is a mess. We're gonna focus on this for a bit, but we'll come back to that. So some things I can do, right? This whole capsule and Z stack, we can just have that on the background. I don't need these layers. Again, it's another bad habit of mine is I kind of lean on Z stacks and layering too much. We'll discuss that. I'm gonna refactor out the whole H stack. Really, this screen, we're going to take to the extreme on refactoring, and back to that table of contents concept I always talk about. You'll see that really in effect here. And I'm doing this as an example of how extreme you can take a SwiftUI view for refactoring. Now, you may love that side of things and be like, oh, I'm going to refactor all my views, and that's fine. You may not like it that much, and you don't have to take it that far, right? You can stop at any point on the spectrum of refactoring. And when we do our profile view, I won't take it to that extreme. I guess the point I'm trying to say is I'm going to give you various like levels of refactoring so you can see them all, and then you can pick and choose, like how far you want to take it for your projects. Okay, so let's go to this H stack of buttons here. So like I said, this Z stack, I don't need. I can put this on the background. Same thing with the capsule. And then before I delete this, I want to make sure, I want to fold up my Z stack and see where the bottom curly brace is. So it is this padding horizontal, just so I know I'm deleting the right curly brace. Okay, so we can delete this Z stack in the capsule, and then this padding horizontal we can also get rid of, right? I'm going to do a Command A, Control I, just to line everything up. It put me back to the bottom. But now our H stack of buttons doesn't have that capsule background. And if I resume the preview, you can see our buttons are just floating without that. But we do want that style. So on my H stack, and I'll code fold here to reduce confusion here. So on the H stack, I can do dot background and then pass in a color. And for now, we're going to pass in dot red just to showcase this, because the secondary background is a little hard to see, and I want to be very clear about what's going on here. So now I can do dot clip shape, right? Capsule. And now you're going to see it is going to give us the capsule. However, it's not giving us the padding we need, right? The capsule is like perfectly encapsulating our circles. However, we want some padding. Now you may think you can just do dot padding down here. Well, that's going to put padding on the outside of things. Again, back to the order of, we haven't really talked about this, but we cover this heavily in SwiftUI fundamentals, how the order of your modifiers like really matter. So if I want to put the padding before the background, whoops, not up in there, now my padding is going to be inside the background, whereas before it was outside. So padding, there you go. Now you see that is a little fatter than we wanted. I think the horizontal padding, like the leading and the trailing, is fine. However, the vertical is too much space. It's too fat, if you will. Now with padding, there's a way to really customize each edge, right? You can do edge insets. So I'm going to pass in edge insets, and you can see when I initialize that, I get top, leading, bottom, trailing. So you can like really customize your padding. So for the top, I'm going to do 10, leading 20, top 10, trailing 20. And I just kind of pulled those numbers out, but you can see that gives us more of what we're looking for. And now that I have the style, we can change our color red back to dot secondary system background. And then I need another parentheses there. And then now you see that's the look we had. So that got rid of the whole Z stack and the capsule and everything. So we're good there. Now let's uncode fold our H stack to reveal the mess here. So with these buttons, there's not much we can do. I mean, I can extract out the whole H stack, which we're going to do, but these individual buttons, there's an extra space here I don't need. There's not a whole lot we can do here, except it looks like I forgot to put this accessibility one out on this button. So now let's clean up our, checkout button, right? So here's where we're conditionally showing it. You can see we're not showing it because we don't have a user. But this whole logic of like view model is checked in, checked out, all this view model stuff, right? This really makes it messy. So let's extract this ternary operator stuff out to the view model. So let's go to our location detail view model. Here I can create another property called var, we'll say button color. That's going to be of type color. And here we're going to return is checked in. If that is true, our color is grub red. If it is false, our color is brand primary. And I'm going to make that a one-liner. I wanted to type it out on 2 lines so you could see it and understand it before I did that. Now back in our location detail view, here for color of the button, I'm going to get rid of our preview here so you can see what we're doing. So for the color, instead of doing like the logic here, I can just do viewModel.button color. Again, cleans that up a little bit. And we're going to do basically the same thing with our image name here for our checked in button. So back to location detail view model. I'm actually going to copy and paste this structure because we're going to just change a few things here. So instead of button color, we'll say button image title. That is of type string. And then same thing is checked in. If that is checked in, well, let's go back to our location detail view since it is the same logic. We want this, person X mark fill, person fill check mark. So we'll copy that, go to our location detail view model, and then paste that here. Again, we're not like writing any new logic. We're just moving things. So now I can do just viewModel.button image title. So back to that. Let's get rid of this. So viewModel.button image title. And now, because that is so much shorter, I can put this on 1 line. So you can see how that's a lot clearer. And we can do the same thing with our accessibility label text. Back to the view model, right? I'm going to copy and paste this because very similar structure. Except now this is going to be button, we'll say A11Y text. If you're not familiar with A11Y, that's short for accessibility. So you have to type out accessibility. So you'll often see accessibility referred to as A11Y. So especially in like my titles for my properties, I definitely want to use that. And I'm not even going to say text, I'm going to say label because that is the proper accessibility term. So button A11Y label, so really button accessibility label. And then now if you go back to location detail view, we can just copy this. Again, same thing we just did above. Paste that here. So now we want it to say check out of location or check into location. So now in our location detail view, we can really clean this up. Say view model dot button A11Y label, right? Okay, much neater and nicer. And again, I want to put this accessibility label on the actual button itself, not the custom view we made. Okay, so now that we've cleaned up little stuff in this H stack, it's getting a little better, but let's actually just take out this whole H stack, right? So I'm gonna command click on the H stack, and you see we don't get extract to subview. So we're gonna have to do this ourselves a little bit, which is fine. So let's code fold this and copy our H stack, command C. So now down here in our views, right, all these file private views, again, I wanna keep this in logical order. So it's going to be go banner image, address view, description view, and then now our horizontal H stack of buttons. So we'll do file private struct, say action button H stack to be specific on what it is. That is of type view. We'll do var body some view, and then I'm going to paste in the H stack that I had. Now, it's not going to work immediately because you'll notice our H stack relies on our view model, right? View model. That's what it says. I can't find view model in scope. Well, we can pass in a view model, and we'll talk about this after I type the code here. So we can do observed object. Remember, observed object is when you're passing in a view model. State object is when you're creating a new one. So we'll do var view model, and that is of type location detail view model. Do a command B. This should be working now, or no errors, I should say. Now, just to clear up any confusion, because I think I've said in the past, or maybe in some comments, that like you shouldn't share view models between views. Well, to me, that doesn't apply to like child views of the view, right? Our action button H stack is part of the location detail view. What that means to me is, our profile view shouldn't share a view model with our map view, right? That's what you should keep separate. But child views of that view, yes, you can rely on the same view model. So now back up into our main view here, where we're using this H stack, I can delete this H stack that we code folded. That's why it doesn't look so bad. I'm actually going to uncode fold it so you can see the gains we're getting here. So delete this H stack here. Delete that. Go right up under description view. Now we can type action button H stack, and then view model just takes in a view model, not a view model. Our view model that we declared up here on line 12. Should be very clear about that. Now our table of contents is starting to come together, right? We have banner image view, description view, action button, grid header text view. This is messing up our table of contents look and feel. And I mentioned this before, how we could refactor out, this H stack into the address view. So let's go to our address view that already exists down here, right? So this body label. Well, I'm just going to throw this into the H stack and put the label up here. And then really all this has is a spacer in it as well. So put that spacer in, and I believe we have some padding on there. Let's go back up to the top and see our overall H stack does have this padding horizontal. So I'm gonna copy that and then go back down here to our address view and paste that padding there. And then now I can, delete the H stack, delete the spacer, delete all that. We still have our address view here that takes in a view model, right? Now again, table of contents is starting to come together. Now let's actually be a little more explicit here. We just have to say address view because this is an H stack, right? We bundled all that in. I want to actually change that to address H stack. So go back up and we'll address this here again, just to be a little more explicit here. So address H stack, not view. Now let me open up the canvas again, and because I'm going to point out the resume. Okay. Kind of like this table of contents. And we're not done. We're going to do this scroll view as well. But you can see the table of contents coming together, right? Banner image view, address H stack, description view, action button H stack, grid header view. That sums up the screen nicely. And let's finish off with this scroll view, and then I'll talk about why I like this method, right? Okay, so again, the scroll view, let's look at it. It just relies on a view model, right? View model, view model, view model, view model. So we can do the same thing we did with our action button H stack and just pass in a view model. So I'm gonna click on the Z stack, command click, extract subview. I think I didn't have extract subview on the H stack because I didn't have my preview out. And I remember people saying that in the comments. I think you have to have the canvas open to get extract subview. I don't know, who knows. But we'll call this avatar grid view. And I know it's going to take in a view model, but we'll handle that down here. So down at the bottom, we have our avatar grid view, right? Let's do our file private. We'll clean up this bottom section in a second, but yeah, we need at observed object var view model, and that is of type location detail view model. Again, we're a child view of the location detail view, so that's fine. Do Command B, should clean up all those errors. Size category. So let's go back up to the top. Remember, on these subviews, we can reach up into the environment and grab the size category, or we could have passed it in. I'm going to just reach up and grab it from this view. That way we're not passing in yet another parameter on our avatar grid view. Save some space there. Cool, so this is all the same. If we go back up to our Z stack here, we should be able to delete this and pass in a view model. Well, I guess I already deleted it. So avatar grid view now takes in a view model, and that will be our view model. So now do Command B to make sure everything works. Speaking of making sure everything works, let's run it, play around with the screen a little bit, make sure we didn't break anything. You should always be doing this during a refactor because refactoring is a great place to introduce what are called regressions. Regression means like something was working and then you changed something and then you broke something that was already working, right? You regressed. So refactoring a screen like this is a great chance that you'll introduce regressions. When I say chance, I mean like you don't want to do that, right? It's very possible to introduce regressions, I guess is a better way to say it, when you're refactoring a whole screen. So click on Chipotle. Okay, screen works fine. Here's our view, scroll view, tap on Sean. Cool. I can check out. I can check back in. Great. All right, screen is working fine. We didn't break anything. So let's start talking about this table of contents kind of style. Because now look at our, I'll get rid of this. Now look at our location detail view, right? 49 to 15, whatever, call it 30-ish lines of code, 35, whatever. Again, we're not trying to strive for as minimal lines of code as possible, but going from like 120 or something like that, 100 what we were at, down to 35 is a nice change. Okay, back to this table of contents that I keep teasing. You can see the structure of our screen is broken down. And here's why I really like this, because if you're coming into this code base, either as a new developer, or you're coming in to fix a bug, or you just want to tweak the action button H stack, right? When this view was all spelled out, if you wanted to tweak the action button H stack, you had to like parse out visually, like, okay, what am I dealing with, right? Because everything was spelled out. Well, here, again, back to the table of contents, I can just be like, okay, here are the chapters. Oh, okay, I just want to mess with the address H stack. Maybe there's a bug on it. Maybe I want to add something to it. I know all I have to do is click into the address H stack, right? It's like the table of contents. Hey, let me go to that chapter. And then when I click on jump to definition, here I am in that chapter, right? It's like all these little structs down here are the chapters of our book, and the table of contents is our overall view here, right? And then it's broken down nicely. It's very easy to understand like what's going on this screen at a high level when I say that, right? You can look at this pretty quickly and get the gist of it. And then again, you have the option to dig deeper into specific chapters. Whereas when everything is spelled out like we had before, it's very hard to find what you're looking for when you're looking for a specific section or functionality on the screen. Now, like I said, this was an example of taking this to the extreme. You don't always want to do that on a screen. I think it worked out well for this screen, just because all the different main like sections of the screen we had, this broke it up nicely. But you'll notice on some other screens, I don't go that far because it may not be necessary and it may be more confusing than helpful, right? Having a table of contents for a screen that has two small views, like if we go to our profile sheet view, right? Having a table of contents for something this simple and this small, I think could be more confusing than helpful. However, on our location detail view, I think it's more helpful than confusing. So you got to use your judgment on when to go this far with the refactoring. It's not a one size fits all. And again, as we do these screens, I'm going to show you various, degrees of how far you can take it, to show you all these examples. And then again, you can decide for yourself on your project, your screens, how far to take this. Because again, the goal is not to get to the smallest lines of code. The goal is to make the file as easy to read and navigate and use as possible. Okay, that wraps up our location detail view. I'm so happy this is finally refactored. This looks so much better, even though like I still don't I still don't love our action button H stack, but again, I've looked at this a bunch. I mean, there's some stuff you can do, but like, I think it is what it is. Actually, I'm not going to do this in the video because this is already getting quite long, but you can do that if you want on your code, and the source code will have this, but I want to put these in like vertical order, right? So banner image should be the first view, not first name avatar view, not location action button. Then it should go, right? If you look at the screen on the right, it should go banner image, address view, description view, location action button. It should follow the flow of the screen vertically. So the source code will have that. I'm not going to do that on video. Feel free to do that on your own as well. Let's keep it moving and go to the profile view. Now let's fix up our profile view, and we'll start with the every screen stuff, right? We're going to wrap the view model, and I believe this is a safe one, in an extension for the profile view. Again, that little extra safety, fold up the class here, cut, paste, and add my little spacing the way I like it to look. And make sure everything's okay and do our private and file private stuff. We're already using private a lot here. Get checked in status, check out, create profiles needs to be public, not public, internal is the right word. Get profile, we need that outside of this class. We need update profile outside of this class. Yep. Okay, so we're good on the private file private audit, and we've wrapped it in our extension. Cool. Profile view, go down to the bottom. Okay, I think we need to do some file private stuff here. Yep, we have some views here. Name background view. Pretty sure we're actually going to delete this anyway, but hey, while we're here, copy that, paste, space, right? Just make all these file private, give me 2 spaces in between. Okay, so that's our private file private audit done. I guess I need a space there. Now the last thing we do on all the screens here is our alert, right? Get rid of this 3-line thing, make it the 1-line thing. Technical terms, right? So $0.0 and give me the closing curly brace and closing parentheses, and we're good. I guess I put the parentheses inside there. So now we're good. Okay. Give me that 1-line alert. Okay. So now the same process, right? We're going to get the quick wins and then reassess. So what are some quick wins here, right? Look at all these accessibility things on our like profile view, this whole thing, right? This whole Z stack accessibility, like we're going to fix that. And actually, let me pull up the canvas so I can start talking about some of this stuff as well. Make this smaller, resume 75%. So this whole top section, right? First name, last name with our background. Remember, we did the Z stack with the stuff on top of it, right? That's the Z stack with our name background view. That's that gray background. And then we put our H stack on top of it. Well, again, just like our location action button, and again, a bad habit I have of relying too much on the Z stack kind of format. Just like we did on that location action button H stack, we can add the background with a rounded rect, give it a corner radius, and we don't need this whole Z stack and name background view and making sure everything's like lined up with the padding that we had to do. All that we're going to fix. And like I said, this accessibility element. So the bulk of our work is going to be done on this like top first name, last name section. Here, a quick win, right? This checkout button, that's a quick win. That's pretty much it for the quick wins. Okay, so let's actually start with the checkout button because like I said, this name stuff is going to be a little more involved. This is a super easy, simple one. So we'll command click on label, extract subview. We'll call this checkout button. There we go. And if I scroll down to the bottom, why is that not green? I guess, I don't know. It didn't change. I think it's because I did something. I don't know. I messed it up. Whatever. Now it works. Checkout button. Give me the return here. It's not relying on any parameters, right? Everything is pretty self-enclosed. And if we go back up, I think we can put the accessibility label on that. Yeah, here we go. And I know before I was putting the accessibility label on the actual button. That's because I couldn't refactor it in like our location action button because we had many location action buttons. So it would have been different for every button. So I couldn't refactor it in those cases. But in this case, I can refactor it and kind of abstract it away. So that's what I'm going to do. Down here, cool. Scroll back up. Now our checkout button, nice and clean. And another quick win that I didn't mention on the initial scroll was this text editor bio, right? With the frame, overlay, accessibility hint. We can abstract this way as well. So I'm gonna command click on that, extract subview. Now this is gonna have to take in a different type of parameter than we've done before. So let me rename this extracted view to bio text editor. And I'm calling it text editor so people know in SwiftUI, because a text editor has to take in a binding to a string, not just a string. So that's why I want to be clear that it is a text editor, right? Because here I have the binding to viewModel.bio. So there I'm going to do a var called just text, but that is a binding. Let me scroll up so my head might be in the way. Binding of type string, right? And let me show you like where I got that, like how I knew that. So now if I try to create a normal text editor, right, and I get the autocomplete, you can see it takes in a binding to a string. It's right there. So we're just basically doing the same thing that the normal text editor does. So now this text editor doesn't take in viewModel.bio, but I'm actually going to cut that because I'm going to need that. This just takes in the text that we pass in, which again is still a binding to a string. And I'm going to clean this up. I'm going to make this stroke color on one line and our accessibility hint there to clean that up. Okay, so now our bio text editor up at the top here, now it does take in a binding string, right? It says that. I'm going to paste that. That's our viewModel.bio. All right, so that cleaned that up. Now let's address our this Z-stack, H-stack, all this text stuff, right? Because this is where the bulk of the work is going to be. So just like before, or before as in what we did with the location action button H-stack, right? I'm going to minimize this Z-stack or code fold. Okay, so this Z-stack doesn't have any modifiers on it itself, okay? So right here, okay, so we're going to get rid of the Z-stack. That's the bottom curly brace. Here's the top curly brace. We're going to get rid of the name background view. And we'll delete the one at the bottom too in a second. Okay, let's do a Command A, Control I. That brings me back to the bottom, but it's good. I needed to be down here anyway. So let's look at this name background view. So the color is secondary system background. We're not going to have to give it a hard-coded height because it's going to go around our H stack of all the stuff, but corner radius 12 and some padding of horizontal. So just remember that stuff. So what we can do here at the top here on our H stack, so that's this right here. We'll get rid of the padding for now. We might re-enter it, but I want to kind of start from a fresh slate. So I want to do .background color, and we'll do the same thing. We'll do .blue this time. Different debug colors, right? So let's resume to see what we have here. Okay, so you see that fills up the whole view, so we definitely don't want that. So we definitely want padding outside of our background. We're also going to want padding on the inside of our background. We'll come back to that. So .padding, do that. There you go. That spaced it in accordingly, as you can see. We do want the corner radius of 12. So we're pulling that from below. But you see, again, order matters. Sorry if my face was blocking that. I put corner radius on the padding. I need to have the corner radius on the background. And again, we didn't really cover the order of modifiers, but now you're getting kind of a lesson in it if you're not familiar. Again, we cover this in depth in SwiftUI fundamentals. But now you can see our corner radius is good on the background. But it looks like our H-stack needs some padding because it's too cramped top to bottom. However, it does look fine horizontally, right? If you look at our profile view, that's some decent padding there. So we just want to put vertical padding on the overall H-stack that holds all this stuff. So that H-stack that holds all this stuff is this H-stack. I believe this is the bottom part of it. Yes, right there. So this H-stack right here, we do want to put vertical padding on. So we can do that here. So padding, and then we'll do .vertical just to do top and bottom. So there you go. That's looking like what we had. Now, I am noticing we have a little extra space above our bio. Maybe you like that, maybe you don't, but we actually kind of need that space. Remember how cramped the keyboard makes things? So our overall padding that we gave to the background color, right, this blue stuff, we gave it padding everywhere. Well, here we might want to do just padding horizontal because we just want the paddings on the edges. We don't want the paddings vertically. So there you go. So that's an example of when you can use just vertical padding and just horizontal padding. And it may seem like we're putting padding on the same view, but again, back to how modifiers work, each modifier is a brand new view. So what we did here when we had this first padding was we only put padding just on the H-stack. And then we put a background color on that included the padding. And then on that whole thing, we put a corner radius. And then now we put padding outside the whole thing to pad from the edges of the screen. So again, the order of the modifiers matter. And just one thing to remember, it's like one of those Russian dolls, right? Where each modifier, you're wrapping it in a new view. So if you remember that, that'll be a good way to know how to order your modifiers. Okay, so the last thing in this top section is this whole Z-stack mess with our profile image view, right? So we have the avatar image view, then we have this edit image button, and then we have all of our accessibility stuff. So we're gonna create a profile image view that encapsulates all this. And actually what we're gonna do, we're gonna copy this whole Z stack. We're gonna kind of take over this edit image thing we created down here. We're just gonna commandeer that and make that our view. So I'm gonna keep this, I'm gonna need this image, right? So I'm gonna keep this kind of down at the bottom. I'm not gonna get rid of it yet. I'm gonna paste our Z stack into this edit image. I'm going to rename edit image to profile image view. And the reason I'm commandeering this is because we would have to delete that anyway, right? Because now instead of edit image, here's what was in edit image, just this, right? We just kind of abstracted that away. So I'm going to cut that, paste that here. I mean, I guess you could keep edit image abstracted, but again, that's the example of where I think that table of contents is going too far because this is just a very basic view. And you can see it's saying, we don't have access to the view model. However, we don't want to pass in the whole view model here, right? If I go back to the location detail view on our action button, the reason we pass in a view model here is because we're using like different functions on the view model. We're using a bunch of different stuff on the view model, right? If you only need one element, and I may have like messed that up here on this screen where maybe we passed in a view model where we only needed one small element of it. Okay, on our avatar grid view, we need to determine columns function, we needed checked in profiles, we needed the show function. Okay, so we didn't want to pass all that stuff individually, so that was a fine place to do it. I believe that's the only places we passed in a view model. So, okay, that was good. I just want to make sure I'm not contradicting myself here. Back to the profile view, however, we only need the avatar image, right? So I don't want to pass in the whole view model, not to mention, as you're seeing, it says cannot find view model in scope. We wrapped it in the extension for that safety. We would have to go back and undo that, but we're not going to do that because all I need to do is instead of passing in a view model, just pass in the avatar, which if I go to profile view model.avatar, you can see that is a UI image. Right now it's a placeholder, but we do all that calculation. So down to the profile view here, this needs to take in a property of an image, and that is a UI image. So now instead of view model.avatar, and again, I will cut this, just takes in image. There we go. Add a little space there, add a vertical space below image. So let's review this real quick. Here's our Z stack. It's got our avatar view, has our image, and we're doing the offset of 30 to move it to where it needs to be. All of our accessibility stuff are abstracted into our profile image view. So now up here at the top, I can delete all of this stuff and do profile image view that takes in an image. And that image is, I remember I pasted it, viewModel.avatar, right? That's the image we're taking in. And then it does have a tap gesture of that. Okay, so let's now take a look. This is as far as we're gonna go on the refactoring, I believe. Make sure I didn't forget anything, right? Because nothing, well, okay, I lied. We're gonna do some little stuff, right? Let's do kind of the same stuff we did here with our view model, right? With this ternary stuff, how we're calculating that on the view model. Let's do that here, right? We're gonna create one called button title. So I'm gonna copy up to profile context. We'll copy that, go to the profile view model. Again, we're gonna have a var, call it button, let's say button title. That is a string. And based on the profile context, it will return create profile or update profile. And you know me, that's going on one line for me. And then let's use it in our profile view, right? So we call DDG button our title. Instead of view model, we do all this stuff. We just do view model dot button title, clean that up. And we can do the same thing for our functions here, except we can't make this a property. I believe we're gonna have to make this another function. Maybe someone can correct me in the comments. So let's do that here in our profile view model. Above checkout, I'm sorry, not checkout, where we're creating and updating profile, right? Okay, above create profile, we will create another function called func determine button action. And that will basically just say if profile context equals dot create, we will call create profile, else call update profile. And if you ever had more profile context, you would have to do an else if, but for now we only have two. And because we only have two, I don't have to have this basic if else statement, right? I can do the ternary operator. Let's go back and do that. Say as create profile or update profile, right? So if we're in the create context, we're creating profile. If not, we're in the update profile. And then now that I'm only calling create and update from this file, I can make these functions private so we don't accidentally call them outside of it. So now where's update profile? Make that private as well. So back to the profile view. Now instead of this logic, I just do viewModel.determine button action. Now this is the only button on the screen, so we can be generic with just button title, determine button. You may argue that's backing yourself into a corner because if you ever do add another button to this screen, now you're gonna have to go back and rewrite that so you're specific. I get it. For now, we're fine. This is most likely going to be the only button. I mean, you never know what you can add, but highly likely, right? You got to play the probabilities. So that cleans that up a little bit. Let me just do another skim through on the refactor. Good. I'm going bottom to top here. Things are fine. Things are fine. I mean, again, this is another level of how far you could take it. We didn't take this as far as everything was its own thing and the whole full-blown table of content structure. But where are we at here? We're at 16 to 79. I don't know. What is that? 50-ish? A little over 50 lines of code. Not terrible. And again, I'm showing you these different levels of how far you can take it so you can see it, experience it, and make your own choice on what style you want to put for your projects. Okay, now that we're as far as we want to take it, let's start talking about some basic small improvements we can make. So we'll start with these text fields. You can add, if I go to profile name style in our custom modifier, we'll jump to definition because this is a name text field. I'm sorry, profile name text is the view we did. So here we can add stuff about our text entry, right? If I can do disable autocorrection, or disable autocorrection true, because this is our name, right? You ever type your name and it autocorrects and you hate that? So for name text, we want to disable autocorrection. So let's go back to our profile view, and I'm going to click into our text field here, right? Let's take a look at some of the stuff you can do. So let's open up developer documentation. Look, okay, so this just gives you overall stuff on the text edit view. Feel free to dive into that. I'm specifically looking for view modifiers, right? And then within view modifiers, you get a bunch. Here's all the accessibility ones. I'm scrolling down to a specific section called text entry. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, text style, multi-line text entry, right? Here's where you can change the keyboard type. Let's dive into that, right? So keyboard type, well, that's not a good one. Let's go to UI keyboard type. Here's the enum, right? You have default, numbers and punctuation, URL, number pad, phone pad, email, decimal pad, Twitter, right? There's specific keyboards to show. So if you want a specific keyboard to show on a specific text field, that's how you do that with keyboard type. We'll keep going back. What else? Yeah, disable autocorrection, that's what we did. Disable auto capitalization. Text content type, let's click into that. UI text content. So this is where, you ever notice how you get those suggestions? Like sometimes in an app, when you're filling out your first name, last name, whatever, it'll suggest Sean, it'll suggest Alan, or maybe you're typing an address. It'll suggest whatever address you have on file. So that is how you get those auto suggestions. However, I did try this on the app, and I don't know if my phone settings might disable it, but I did try to make our name text views, first name, or I guess it's given name is your first name, and then family name would be the last name. I did try that, and it didn't work on my keyboard. Maybe try it for yourself, see if you can get it to work. And again, I don't know, maybe if I have something on my phone, like settings turned off, I don't know. It didn't quite work when I tried to do it. But I wanted to point out all the various stuff you can do on text fields. All we did was disable our auto correction for our first and last name. And I'm not going to do that for company name. Because, a lot of times company names, even though they can have weird names that you don't want to autocorrect, a lot of times a company name like Apple, you do want to like autocorrect that kind of stuff. So I'm leaving it off. If you choose to put it on, put it on. Now let's talk more about this create profile button down at the bottom. So we can make this a little more flexible. And this is kind of general. This really doesn't have anything to do with this screen. But if we go to our custom views, our buttons, our DDG button, right, we're just passing in a title and we're hard coding the color. Well, if you wanted to add flexibility, but still kind of hard code that color, you can add a var color of type color, give it a default value of .brand primary, and then now just make our background color, right, whenever we passed in. However, if we don't pass in a color, it's going to default to brand primary. Let's go back to our profile view. I'll show you this in action. Here we have our DDG button, right? Well, if I did DDG button, initialize that, you see I get two initializers now, one with a color, one without. So if we have a color, we can pass in red, blue, whatever. If we just pass in a title, it's going to default to brand primary. So it adds a little bit of flexibility to your buttons. And I wanted to point that out because having something like DDG button, like a very common button type in your app, super common. So I think adding that flexibility is something you should do to your buttons in your project, even if it's not applicable to our project. Now, sticking with this button, I got a couple comments about, hey, should we disable this button if it doesn't meet the requirements of our profile view? And actually, while I'm looking at my preview, let me do something because I know I'm going to forget this. Let's get rid of that blue color and go back to secondary system background here. So not color.blue, color, initialize that, secondary system background, right? Our app would have looked all messed up. Anyway, you know how we pop up the pop-up or the alert, I'm sorry, if like their first name is empty or their profile view is empty? Well, a couple people have mentioned, hey, should we just disable the create or update profile button until they meet all the requirements? And I'm against that because, our button's going to be disabled and the user is not going to quite know. Like, you may think it's obvious that they have to have everything and the characters have to be under 100 before you can update the button. However, I think that can lead to confusion and frustration. People trying to figure out, how do I make this button enable? What am I missing? Whereas if we let them tap the button and we show our pop-up, we're telling them exactly what they need. So we're putting that information in the pop-up. Another way to do this would be to maybe have little labels above and below each field to say, this is required, right? This needs to be 100, right? Avatar is required. You see that a lot on the web forms. You see that a lot. However, you don't really see it on apps that much. So I chose to not have those labels and clutter up the UI and put that information in the alert when they tap it to let them know. But that's why I'm against like disabling the button until they've met all the requirements. It's because they might not know what the requirements are. All right, now let's address that haptic that we deleted, right? Because we want to play a haptic on a successful checkout. And I also want to show the loading screen, right? Because again, on a bad network, they're tapping the checkout button, but the button's still there. Maybe it takes 5 seconds for the network call to come through. They're still tapping the button, firing off more networks. So we want to do the same thing we did for the checkout button on our location detail view for this checkout button. So down to the checkout button here, we can do disabled, same thing, view model is loading. We already had the loading because we're doing a loading screen when we pull in the profile. So that was already set up. Again, this is very similar, almost exactly what we did on the previous screen. So a little bit of review here. Onto our profile view model. Anytime we are checking out, so where's our checkout function? I believe it's up here. Yep, here's our checkout function, right? So this is what fires off when they tap that button. Okay, so the network call actually starts here before the CloudKit Manager stuff. So I will show loading view. And then here where we get our result back, hide loading. Why don't I have hide loading view? Command B, what am I missing? Oh, I'm in the wrong spot. I need to be above the result in the switch. There we go. Okay, so now that I'm showing it, hiding the loading view accordingly, self dot, there we go. Okay, so now I want to actually play the haptic upon success. And actually I just realized, just like our location detail view, we need to put this in 2 different spots, right? So we want to hide it here when we get our save network callbacks. Remember, we're doing 2 network calls here. And then we also want to hide it in the failure case of the overall fetch record, right? We're doing the nested network call, so we got to do it in 2 places. But upon the success of our save, right? We've checked out, we've successfully saved it. Now is where I want to play the haptic. So we'll do haptic manager.play success. Okay, let's test this to see the new behavior of our loading view while we are checking out of our profile. Okay, so we'll go to the profile. There's the loading, it's pulling it in. Now when I type checkout, we should see that same loading view and then check out. Before, when we put this in, I said I didn't want to bother them with the loading screen. But again, you got to think about these edge cases. This is why we're in the optimization section, right? Not everybody has a great internet connection, and it may take 5 to 10 seconds, if at all, before they check out. So I want to be able to handle that. And somebody that does have a lightning fast connection, when they tap checkout, it only pops up for a second and goes away. And that's the visual cue that they've been successfully checked out. And remember, I said you could pop up an alert that says you've been successfully checked out. I think this serves the same purpose. And again, we disabled the button during the loading so they can't like spam the network calls and get things all out of sync. Okay, so that is working as we expected. Okay, the final bit of small optimization here is actually going to be in our photo picker stuff here, right? So photo picker, what we can do is we don't need this presentation mode, and I'll tell you why. So I'm going to delete that, and then we're using that down here, right? This photo picker presentation mode, because here's why we don't need it, right? We get a UI image picker controller back after they've set this, right? So we can just call picker.dismiss, use the old UIKit way to do things, because we are technically in UIKit in this section, right? And then we say animated true, and we actually don't need this completion because we're not using it. So we were just able to, get rid of maybe an unnecessary variable and clean up this line of code a little bit. Again, small optimizations. Now that wraps up this optimization and refactor pass on the profile view. On to the next one. In this video, we're going to work on our CloudKit Manager, and we're going to start off by doing some small fixes. Then we're going to talk about that cursor, or the kind of pagination stuff, how we can get more records if we can't get them all in like the first network call. And then I'm going to talk about weak self. Okay, so let's start with those small changes. And the small change I'm going to make here, and I think I mentioned this when I did this originally, but here, this DDG profile, our profile.is checked in, we can actually just get this off the record rather than having a property on our DDG profile, and you'll see that'll let us clean that up a little bit. So instead of profile.checked in, we're gonna do record, and then at the key for DDG profile is checked in. And when we do it this way, we have to cast it as a CK record.reference, because again, it doesn't know what type it is here. So if this is has a value, I should say, it will be stored in location reference, which we still have here. So all we did here was pulled this information off of the record rather than, putting it on our DDG profile. And when we do that, and this is like a very minor thing, by the way, this is not huge, but it allows us to get rid of this property. This is checked in because we don't use it anywhere. And we can get rid of it down here as well. Because again, that was the only place we were using it. So small simplification on our DDG profile, but it is helpful to kind of trim that fat, if you will, and clean things up a little bit. So back to the CloudKit Manager. And again, we're just pulling this information right off the record rather than putting it onto our profile first. Kind of taking out an extra step there. And if you look down here, this is what we actually did right here, right? We didn't do that extra step because here we don't have the profile. So again, consistency and cleanliness there. Scrolling back up, another thing, just kind of cleaning up the code a little bit. You know, we wrote this extension on our record. So if I go to extensions, we have our CK record extension, right? Where we're converting a record to a DDG location or a DDG profile. Well, turns out, and again, shout out to Stuart Lynch for pointing this one out. I actually was unaware of this syntax. Well, it turns out we don't need this closure. If we open up the initializer on the map, we can do DDG location.init here. We don't need that record because we're initializing it right on the record. So again, I was unaware of this syntax, but essentially we're initializing a DDG location from each record within our locations array. So what that does, if I go to our extension on CK record, not only do I not need any of this code anymore, like I can delete this entire file. And you know, deleting code is always nice. Deleting a file is even better. Now I'm going to get an error because we have to do this for our profile as well. That was just our DDG location. So I'm actually going to copy this and paste it down here, except I'm going to change this to DDG profile. If we do a Command B, I believe those are the only two places we are using that. Again, got to delete a whole file, a whole extension, a little bit of code for a cleaner solution. And then the last little bit of cleanup here, you see how we're returning this empty records? Well, we're going to use the same kind of format we've been using for all of our other network calls here, right? Where we're unwrapping the records and the error together like that. Just do that here as well. So that was just a little bit of inconsistency there, a little bit of cleanup in our get locations call. Okay, so that was the small little cleanup stuff. Again, nothing groundbreaking, nothing major, but again, just small polish, small cleanup. But that stuff really adds up. I don't want to discount that like it's no big deal. Like on the surface, just looking at each one individually may seem like no big deal, but when you do that little cleanup all throughout your code base, I believe anyway, that really, really adds up. So let's talk about this cursor. So I'm going to go back to the top of my CloudKit Manager. So remember, the cursor is how we get back the next batch of records when the first network call was maxed out. Kind of like pagination, right? How you download the first 100 users, and then as you scroll down, you download the next 100 users, etc. So that kind of concept, except in CloudKit. So let's go through our network calls and see where we need that. Okay, get user record, we don't need that. Get locations, we know we only have 8 locations, and like I said, our app is highly curated, so we're not gonna have thousands of locations, so we don't need that for get locations. We should always be fine there. Get checked in profiles for location. Now this is the specific location, not all of our profiles like our other network calls are. So I'm going to say, no, we don't need it here, even though you may be thinking, well, what if we have, 1,000 people checked in? Well, if you think about it realistically, Chipotle can't hold 1,000 people. And I just use Chipotle as the example, but all of our curated locations are, restaurants, small bars, eateries, like Grace's Deli's not holding 1,000 people. So based on that realistic factor, and these, locations have capacity limits before the fire marshal comes, that kind of stuff, I don't believe we're going to have more, than a couple hundred people. And I think CloudKit is going to be okay because our profiles are relatively small data-wise. Again, they're not high-res images, small bits of data, but I think we're going to be fine downloading those for each individual location. A couple hundred should be good to go. Of course, if that backfires, maybe we start supporting larger venues in the future, we may revisit that. But for now, that's my reasoning why we won't need it here. And keep going. Okay, get checked in profiles dictionary. Now this is our checked in profiles for every location. So this one, there could be 300, 400, 500 when you add it up for every single location. So yes, we will need it for that one. And then this is similar as well. Get checked in profiles count. That's for our badges on the map screen. Remember, that's basically the same network call as our get checked in profiles. So that will need it as well. And then we got our batch save. Okay, so these are the only 2 functions we need it for. Our get checked in profiles count and our get checked in profiles dictionary. And like I said, these are the queries that are querying our entire list of users and then building the dictionary based on like who's checked in where. Now, because this cursor is a bit involved and I don't want to make this video super long, we're only going to handle it for one of these functions. We'll do get profiles dictionary. And it is essentially the same exact thing to implement it for this function down here. So I'm going to leave that for you as a challenge to do on your own. But again, it's basically the same thing. I'm just not going to do it twice on video. But I recommend you do the challenge because repetition is the key. But I have a feeling this is going to be a little bit of a long video as it is, so trying to cut the time there. Okay, big picture, let's talk about what we're going to do here. Let me get this function up here. So let's review, walk through what's going on here. We're setting our predicate to see, if that is checked in, nil check equals 1. Give me all the records that have that of type profile. And then this is the streaming one, right? Record fetch block. This is like what happens as each record comes in. So this is where we're building our dictionary. Again, I'm keeping it super high level. And then this is what gets fired off once all of the records have come back in. They've all streamed in this fetch record block. And remember, the limit of records is variable in CloudKit. Like it's not like a set 100. It depends on how much data there are. That's why I said, because our profiles are relatively small, I bet we'll get back a lot, but I don't know the maximum. So that's where this cursor comes into play, right? In this query completion block. After it's gotten all the records it can, if this cursor has a value, if it's not nil, that means there's more records to go get. And essentially the cursor is, again, like the cursor I'm putting in these words here as I'm clicking around, it keeps your spot in the list of records. So for nice, easy numbers, let's say this did return the first 100 profiles. Well, our cursor would be at 101, and we would get from 101 up until the max of whatever we can get. So as long as this cursor has a value, we know there are more records. So what we need to do is create another function that fetches the next batch of records. And we're creating a separate function, even though it will be a little bit similar to this, for two main reasons. One, the CK query operation is different. So up here on line 79, our CK query operation takes in a query. Well, let's just do let test, just to show you this here. CK query operation. You see, we have two initializers. One takes in a cursor, one takes in a query. So that's different, right? We're going to be using the cursor one. And the cursor basically holds all this information as well, your predicate, profile type. We don't have to create that again. Our cursor knows that. But the other reason we're going to create a whole separate function is because we're going to have to pass in this checked in profiles, because this new network call is going to basically keep adding to this existing checked in profiles. So like I've said plenty of times before, but I want to reiterate, could we make this one function that takes in a bunch of different stuff and generics, and then you conditionally either, take in a query or conditionally take in a cursor, and then you conditionally use the array? Like you could jam this into one function. I just think it would be a very convoluted and confusing function. So again, I'm going to choose to separate them out even though they will be similar. And then we're going to call that function here in this query completion block. We're going to have basically a nil check for the cursor, right? If let cursor equals cursor, that means we have a value at the cursor, it's not nil. Then run this, we're going to call it continue with checked in profiles or something like that. Then run that. And then we'll call that recursively within that function. So if you're not familiar with recursive functions, you're going to get a little lesson here on that. We're not going to go too deep into it, but high level stuff. So let's start off by writing that function, and then you'll see it kind of come together. Okay, so above the profiles count function and below the other one, we're going to call it func continue with checked in profiles dict. I'm going to just short dictionary to dict, and that does take in a cursor, which is of type CK operation or CK query operation dot cursor, right? That's the type it is. That's the cursor we're going to pass in. And then, like I said, we also want to pass in our dictionary. So I'll say dictionary, and I'm going to put these on separate lines because this is going to be a very long function signature. And that dictionary we're going to pass in is this one that we're building up here, right? That has the key of the CK record ID, which is our location ID, and then the array of DDG profiles. So I'm going to literally copy that as the type and reuse it down here. So that is the type of dictionary we're going to pass in. And this is literally the exact dictionary we are going to pass in when we use it. And then the third parameter is our completion handler, which I'm going to go back up and steal from here because it is the same. So completed, because we're on success case, we're returning our dictionary, right, of our CK record ID and profile. And in the failure case, we're returning an error. So I'm going to copy that whole completion handler because it is the same. Down here, give me my comma, hit return. There we go. Now open and close curly braces, do a command B. Should be good to go. Yep, okay. That's because it's not yelling at me. So that is our function signature. It's a long one. If you have ways to shorten it up, feel free. Let me know. But I do like the name of continue with to let this know that this is kind of like the cursor version of it. And again, it does take in that cursor. It does pass in a dictionary because we're going to continue building this dictionary, and then the completion handler as well. So let's start writing this function. Now, the first thing I want to do is create a var of checked in profiles, and that is going to equal dictionary. The dictionary is what we passed in right here. And the reason I'm creating it a variable is because when you pass something in as a parameter, it's immutable. It's like a let, so I can't change it. So here I'm essentially making a copy of it, but that's a variable, so it's mutable. And the reason I need it to be mutable, which means I can change it, is because in this network call, I'm going to be basically building on top of the existing dictionary with the more profiles that I get. So that's the first thing I'm going to need. And then here I'm going to create my query. So let operation equal ck query operation. And again, it takes in a cursor. And the cursor we're going to pass in is the cursor that we pass in to the function. Now here's where I said it's similar to the function we're continuing here, right? We need these two completion handlers, right? We have our fetch record block, and then we have our completion block. And then we need to add it to the operation, remember? Don't forget that. So it's literally, well, not literally the same, but to start, it's going to be the same. So we're going to copy that, and I'll walk through it just so we're not blindly copying and pasting. So this first fetch record block is exactly the same, because here we're basically creating a profile from our record. We're making sure the record does have a location reference. That way we can use that location reference as our key and then build the dictionary, right? Same operation we did a couple videos ago when we initially built this dictionary, same thing. Because again, we're just continuing that building. Here's where it gets a little bit different, because in this ck query operation block, well, we are in our continue checked in profile, so we're in the continuation one. Now, we haven't done this in the original function yet, which I'm debating if I should do now, but I don't want to confuse you. So we'll finish writing this one out. But we need to do that nil check for our cursor. And even though we are in the continue function, this is still possible to have more. Because let's say we did one network call and we had a cursor, so that means we had more. Well, even on the second network call, we could still have more. So this is where I said we need to call this function, this continue with, recursively within itself. So let's do that nil check on the cursor. So I'm going to scroll up here, say if let cursor equals cursor. And here's the recursive function. So we'll do self.continue with, right? We're calling itself. That's what a recursive function does. It's a function that calls itself. So we're calling ourselves, and the cursor we're going to pass in is the cursor we get back from this completion block. So that as well is cursor. And the dictionary we're going to pass in is our checked in profiles, right? This is the copy of what the first network call did. So this may have 100 profiles in it, right? So this is basically starting from where we left off. So that is going to be checked in profiles. And again, for the sake of sanity here, we're going to do like this. Scroll up a bit, or wrong return. Yeah, I want the return to be here. And then here's the result. So hit return there, and it is a result, well, not capital R, lowercase r. And then we're going to switch off that result. Familiar, right? And to give us our success and failure, switch must be exhaustive. That's what I was looking for. And in the success case, we will call our completed. And I guess we need to pass this up here too. Let profiles. I'm just going to call this profiles, even though it's checked in profiles, just to make some difference here. So dot success, and it needs to return a dictionary, which is profiles, which is what we're getting back in the success case. And then failure, completed, dot failure with error, which we haven't got access to yet. Let error. There we go. And I guess I put this out of order. So that guard let error should be like the first thing that happens. Then we check for our cursor. So we do, if the cursor is nil, right, we need an else case if that's nil. So if it's nil, that means we are completed with success. We're at the end of our list, and call completed with the checked in profiles. Actually, I guess I didn't need to go 2 lines here. Not as bad as I thought it was going to be. We'll clean this up a bit. And don't worry, this is confusing. I'm going to put print statements all throughout this stuff. We're going to see it happen step by step to really illustrate what's going on. But we're going to do this kind of same thing, this if let cursor equals cursor. I'm going to copy that, and we're going to paste this into our main function, right? The initial get checked in profiles, right? Well, here, it is basically the same code, right? Because we're checking, hey, do we have a value at the cursor? If we do have a value at the cursor, now we're calling continue with checked in profiles dict. And again, this is not recursive because this is one function calling another function, whereas down here, this is the function calling itself. That's why this one is recursive. Okay, so basically the same logic applies. And if you're confused by all this like success completed, like how does this work? Essentially the way the recursive function works is it keeps calling itself. And then once it gets to the end of the list, all of the success cases will be called the completion handlers, and it kind of like propagates back up the list, right? Like if we go 4 layers deep, right? Say we have 4 cursors, it's a list of 1,000 things, and we end up having 4 cursors. We're going to go 4 network calls deep essentially, and then at the last one, when the cursor is nil, it's going to call completed, and then all those changes are going to propagate back up all the way to our initial one of this get checked in profiles dictionary, which we'll call this success case, actually, oh, good catch, Sean. This can be deleted because if I leave this in, it's going to call completed success basically no matter what happens here, right? If I have a cursor, if I don't have a cursor, the execution is going to continue and it's going to run that. I don't want that to run. I only want completed to run if cursor is nil, right? If I don't have more stuff to get, I don't want completed success to run. Okay, now let's clear this up for you if you're not familiar with recursive functions and you're not following me right now. Again, I'm going to put print statements all throughout, and that should show you step by step what's going on. So the first print statement here in our get profiles dictionary, I'll show you this. There's a reason here with on appear, a little buggy. We'll talk about this. But again, I like to use emoji in my print statements. So I'm going to say network call fired off, just so I know like this all started. I guess I don't need to capitalize everything. Okay, let's copy this because I'm just going to use the structure of the print statement. Okay, down here in the cursor, I'm going to say our first cursor, give me a 1 here. You'll see why I'm doing these emojis because we're going to have a ton of print statements and these emoji really help it like stand out. So I'm going to say initial cursor is not nil. And, just to really see it, I like to do this, actually print out the cursor, even though it's like some machine code gibberish. I don't know. I like that little bit of extra information. So I'm going to copy this. And I also want, at this point, I want to see the dictionary, like the current status of the dictionary. So for that, I'm going to give a little group of people. Sure, I know this is a family, but whatever. It gives me the idea here. Current dictionary. And then I want to print out checked in profiles. So what's going on here, this is just going to let me know I have a cursor. And then at that point, I'm going to see the status of my dictionary. So as we go step by step, you're going to see this dictionary slowly build. And again, I hope that makes this whole thing make sense to you. That's why we're going this extra mile. And again, if you already understand recursive functions and all this stuff, this might be a little bit of review, but we're going to copy that. And then here in our get checked in profiles, I want to do it here as well. So except not initial cursor is not nil, I'll say recursive cursor is not nil. And instead of a 1, again, this is where the emojis like really come into play. I'll just do a red circle right there. And again, current dictionary, and you'll see this dictionary build over time. And then a couple more print statements here. We're almost done with this, but like I said, this will really clear things up, I think. So we'll do recursive. Well, I'll do a smiley face here for the success case. Smiley face, circle, recursive success, and I will print profiles, but I'll say profiles equals, or I'll do dictionary like that. And then we'll do, just in case there is an error, we'll do the little X. So XO, and we'll say recursive error. And I'm putting recursive in front of it just so I know, hey, I got an error in the recursive thing, and then we'll print off the error. We shouldn't see this, but I always like to have those print statements as well because, okay, so we're in the recursive thing. And again, I'll walk through this. Let's go to the success. And I want this one to say smiley face. We'll do the 1 again because this is the initial cursor success in the dictionary. Cool. And then let me copy this error here because we'll do the initial error as well, just in case this happens. Again, we shouldn't see this, but hey, you never know. I'll just say initial error. Okay, so hopefully what we should see here is when we get to our first cursor, it's going to let me know the cursor was not nil. Cool. Give me the current status of the dictionary. Well, actually, let me back up 1 second before I walk through this. What we need to do to test this here. Okay, so we're in our get checked in profiles dictionary. As part of our operation, we need to do operation.result limit equals 1. So basically, I can only get back 1 record. So this is going to fire off every record, but it's going to let us test our recursiveness and how deep we can go. So operation results limit 1, we're also going to need that on our recursive version as well. So down here in continuous checked in profiles, our operation here, result limit 1. Again, only for testing purposes, so we can see this fire off 1 by 1. Okay, now let me walk through what should happen, right? We should make the network call. We should get back 1 result. But with that 1 result, we should get back a cursor because we have more, right? So when we get down here, we're going to have a value for our cursor. It's not going to be nil. So that means we're going to go into here. So that should print off initial cursor is not nil. Here's the cursor. It should print off the current version of the dictionary, which should just have 1 person in it because that's all we got. And then the continue with checked in profiles dictionary will fire off, which we're not going to be in the success case yet. We're going to go down here. So this fires off. And again, we're only going to be able to get back 1. So we should get a cursor as well. So we're going to get into the cursor. However, This record fetch block also fired off because we got back one more record. So we should add one more record into our dictionary. That's what this does. So our dictionary should have 2 values in it, right? That's why I keep printing off the current dictionary. So in the next print statement, we should see recursive cursor is not nil with our current dictionary that only has 2 people in it. And then that cycle is going to continue because, we're going to keep having a cursor until we get to like our 5th or 6th profile, because that's how many we have. And then eventually the cursor is going to be nil, and then this completed will fire off, propagating up the checked in profiles all the way back up to the original one. And then when that fires off, it's done and our UI will update. Now, you're going to see our UI is going to take a little bit extra to update. That's because we're taking 5 or 6, I can't remember how many profiles we're going to get, but 5 or 6 round trip, full queries of our database. And we're making all those trips again because we put our result limit to 1. We specifically did that to test this. Before we run this, let's go to our location list view, because that's where this is called. And we may have an issue with onAppear. So I'm going to screens, location list view, hit location list view, get rid of the preview. We're not going to need you. So in onAppear, I'm going to make this 2 lines just for now because, I want to show something. So I want to do print and then, eyes onAppear called, because sometimes this gets called twice and it seems like it's a bug in SwiftUI. If you Google SwiftUI onAppear called twice, you'll see a ton of Stack Overflow articles on it. Some people saying it got fixed in Xcode 13 beta 1. I tried running it, it didn't fix it, but it also doesn't happen all the time. So I haven't ran this yet, so maybe it won't even happen. Maybe it'll only get called once. It is intermittent, but it is a bug, and I'll show you how to handle that bug if it pops up. I'll probably show you how to handle it even if it doesn't pop up, but we'll see what happens here. So let's run this, and we should see all those print statements play out, and I'll walk through it, and hopefully it will make more sense. And then you can play with it as well if you're still confused and to help you figure it out. Okay, I'm gonna make some adjustments here. We're gonna need all the room we can get on our printout here. No, not that far. Okay, bring up the simulator again. Okay, so now when I hit locations, you're gonna see a bunch of stuff print out, and hopefully it works fine. So hit locations. Okay, so onAppear only fired off once. Let's go back to Xcode. So that was good. But like I said, if you do see onAppear fired off twice, well, it's going to mix up all of our print statements because the network call is going to happen twice and it's going to be confusing. But we only saw it get called fired off once, and now you see why I do these emojis, right? Look how nice and easy this is. Okay, so let's walk through this, right? So onAppear got called, our network call fired off. The initial cursor is not nil, again, as expected, because we set the max results to 1. Our current dictionary should only have 1 person in it. I know this is a little bit of gibberish to read through, but I always look for the first name, dummy. Okay, so that is the only profile in our current dictionary. Again, we expected only 1. So because that cursor was not nil, now we fire off our second cursor, right, the recursive function. And the current dictionary at that point, because now we've gotten 1 more result back, so now we should have 2 here. So there you go, we have dummy right there, and then we have mock right here. And then we still have more records. So the third recursive cursor is not nil. So here we go. Now we have 3 records, right? Dummy, mock, jobs. 4th recursive cursor. So you see we're building the dictionary. So I wanted to show you how that built. And then now at the end, recursive success, recursive success. This is it being propagated up, right? We went 5 layers deep and finally our cursor was nil. So we could call success. And then so from the very bottom level, success gets called up to the next level. That success can now get called up, right? So that success propagates all the way up the layers to our initial function, which then populates our UI, which I don't even remember seeing populate. So let's run this again and see our UI in action. We'll see how long it takes because, again, we're making 5 separate round-trip network calls. That's also a full query of our database. So it's expected for this to take long, but remember, we're limiting it to 1 record at a time. That's why. So hit locations. And you can see the network call going off in the background, and there you go. The UI popped up. That was actually a good example. I'm going to do that again. We're going to run it. So watch as I hit locations, you can see the network calls firing off in the background in real time, and then you can see our avatars come back. And again, we're making 5 separate round trips. So to test this, we'll stop that. We won't get rid of it fully, but let's go back to our CloudKit manager and let's remove our result limit. I'm actually just going to comment it out. That way it's still there in the source code for you. Where's the result limit? There we go. So I just commented out the result limits in both of our network calls. So now when I run this, you should see we don't go into this cursor stuff because now we're able to get all of our records at once, and our network call should be snappy fast, just like usual. Yep, there it goes. And you see onAppear called, network call fired off, and nothing went into our cursor. All of our other print statements were in our cursor stuff. So our cursor was nil, no big deal. Now, while I'm thinking about it, so I got lucky recording this that it on appear wasn't getting called twice. If you are seeing it, you'll see how like intermittent it is. I don't know. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. So let me show you how to fix that. And it's a hacky workaround. Hopefully the bug actually gets fixed in SwiftUI, but if you're running into that issue and you don't want these network calls firing off twice, then go to location list view. Here's the quick little hacky workaround. I'm not gonna like refactor it or anything like that, just to show you. Basically you do a flag, so at state private var, we'll say on appear has fired, whatever, equals false, just to start off. And then on the on appear, you would do, if on appear has fired, or I'm sorry, you would say if on appear has not fired, right? If that hasn't happened yet, then go ahead and do like, your network calls and stuff like that. But here you also want to set on appear has fired equals true. So it's just a hacky little flag to make sure only the first on appear actually executes your network call. The second on appear will still get fired off because again, it's a SwiftUI bug, I believe, but at least your network call won't get fired off in that second on appear. Like I said, we didn't see it. I got lucky in the recording that it didn't happen. Hopefully you don't as well, but if you do, that's a good fix for it. Okay, to clean up, I'm actually going to Command Z here. I'm going to get rid of all that. I showed you how to do it. You have the reference, but I don't want that as part of the final code. And then in CloudKit Manager, I'm going to clean up all of these print statements just to keep my code clean. And again, don't forget to clean all those up. So clean that up. I'm going to leave the result limit commented out, just, so you see that. But again, this is how I actually debug stuff when I'm like, no, I shouldn't say debug stuff. When I'm not quite sure exactly what's going on. I mean, like I understood how recursive functions work, but I guess I should say when I'm not sure. I guess when I want to see it, you know what I mean? Like I thought that's how it was going to work, but I was like, let me actually see this to make sure that's what's actually happening. So I'll usually do this, a bunch of print statements just like I did there. Code them with emoji so it's easy to decipher your console. Just a little example of how I usually do that. So to wrap this up real quick, let's talk about weak self because we're not using weak self anywhere. So let's go to our a location list view model or any view model, right? Because that's where we're actually making our network calls, right? And we're implicitly capturing self. Now you may see people do, weak self to, prevent retain cycles. That's fine. However, you don't always have to do that. And the reason people would do that is to prevent memory leaks. Another way to think about memory leaks is called a retain cycle. And the reason I said retain cycle is because cycle is the key word. Cycle means two things have to be pointing at each other or have a reference to each other. I always think of the Spider-Man meme where they're like pointing at each other. So we're in a case where only one Spider-Man is pointing, the other Spider-Man is not pointing. Confused? Cool. Let me explain. So what that means is our CloudKit manager has a reference to self, right? Because we need that for our checked-in profiles, alert item, and all that stuff. However, self doesn't have a reference to CloudKit manager. So that's what I'm talking about. Two things have to have a reference to each other. Now, the way that could happen, I'm not actually going to write it out because it's complicated syntax, but let's say we wanted to put our CloudKit manager as a variable on our location list model, right? You would do var get checked in profiles, whatever, and that would equal, a function, and you would write that out. So if you did that, now our location list view model would have a reference to CloudKit manager, right? Because this would be CloudKit manager stuff. So now our location list view model will have a reference to CloudKit manager, and CloudKit manager would have a reference to our location list view model. That would be the retain cycle, two things pointing at each other. But right now, we just have our CloudKit manager pointing at our location list view model, but the location list view model is not pointing back. So no need to worry about retain cycles here. And a good clear way to find out if you have one, at least a very obvious one, is I'm gonna run it here. And while our project is running, we can click on the little spray can looking thing to see some performance stuff here. So I'm gonna pull up the memory one, tap memory, and you can see, let me get this down here. I'm gonna try to not block this, right? So this is as our app is running, you can see our memory, 102, whatever. Now, as I start doing stuff, I'm gonna move this over here. As I start doing stuff, you're gonna see the memory move. So when I go to locations and we make that network call, we got a little spike in memory, but it went back down, right? So let's go back to the map screen because this is the best way to illustrate it. Watch when I go to the map, we see this step up, right? So now here's the step up. But when I go away from the map, you're gonna see it step back down. So let's go to locations. Okay, step back down. So that means the map got deallocated, everything's good to go. The clearest way to see if you have a retain cycle is that step would not step back down. However, when you went back to the map screen, let me go back to the map again. You see how we can create these little steps? Well, if you have a retain cycle or memory leak, that step would just keep going up. It wouldn't come back down. So you would be building this little like staircase, and you would see this memory use like this dial start to go up. You would see 111 megabytes turn to like 300 megabytes. It just keeps adding on top of each other. But you see when we navigate away, the map goes away, memory goes away. Let's go to profile, make sure nothing crazy is going on. Cool, went up a little bit because we got profile stuff in there. Back to locations, and we didn't see a step down, but that's fine as long as we don't keep continually seeing steps up. I paused because we got like a little bump. I was like, oh, don't do this to me. I don't know what's going on there, but that little tiny bump is nothing. Back to the map, we'll see a nice little step up, but again, we'll see a step down here when we go away from the map. Right. And again, I'm not saying our app is like perfect memory usage. I haven't like fully audited or really dove in, but this is again a way to run your app, test some things, go to Chipotle. Okay, we see a little bit extra memory because we got our users, but run your app and watch this. And if you keep seeing a step function like go up to the moon, like a stairway to heaven, that's not good. That's what you want to watch out for, is just that runaway memory. So we're good there. And again, I'm not saying we can't optimize it more. That's again, way beyond the scope of the course, but there's nothing ridiculously egregious, right? Nothing that we have to fix no matter what. So that's what I wanted to point out. And just as an example, if you do have something that is pointing to each other, even though our CloudKit manager, our location list view model isn't pointing to our CloudKit manager, so we don't have one. Again, you would put the weak self here. And the funny thing is you'll see a lot of developers just put weak self everywhere. And that's not going to be inherently bad. It's not going to mess anything up. However, you see here, that makes self optional. So you got to put the optional there, or you got to do guard let self equals self, else return to unwrap the optional. So if you're using weak when you don't have to be, you're just doing a lot of needlessly unwrapping of the optional. But I guess it is one way to, be better safe than sorry. That brings me up to this meme that I always think of from iOS memes. I thought it was hilarious. I featured it on Swift News. But you see here, how do you avoid retain cycles? I just write weak self everywhere. Yeah, same here. And then the orange guy. I carefully consider whether the closure will actually be retained. Orange was the imposter. Like, no, you don't. Like, because I would say the majority of iOS devs just blanket everything with weak self just to cover their ass, right? Rather than carefully considering it. So I don't know if you're familiar with the game Among Us, where you have to find out who the imposter is. Clearly, if you consider whether the closure will actually be retained, that's not what iOS devs do, even though that's what they should do. Anyway, that little bonus lesson on weak self will wrap up the optimization section for now. Because again, the optimization section is a living section. The course is only 6 weeks old. So I'm sure as the months go by and as more and more developers take the course, maybe things will pop up in ways we can optimize it. So this may not be the last optimization video, but it is at least right now. There's one major step we have to do before we can make Dub Grub official, push it to test flight, push it to the App Store, and that is to convert our database to production. Because this whole time we've been building the app, we've been in the development environment. Well, when it comes time for the real thing, we got to change that to production. Now, this is the second time I'm recording this, and it's hilarious because the first time I recorded this, I said that, I only get one chance to deploy to production. I can't rehearse this, so hopefully it's not a train wreck. Well, the first time was a train wreck because this guy forgot to record his screen. So I did deploy it to production. I finished the video and then I looked up and I forgot to screen record. So here I am recording again. However, my database is already pushed to production. So my apologies, but there's not a ton different. So I still think we can make this work. So anyway, up in your CloudKit, click on your CloudKit database. Now here I am in Dub Grub beta. This is the app I built and pushed to production before I recorded our course. You can see this container has been deployed to production, but I'll go to my Dub Grub, like the one we have been building. In the original recording, this would say this container has not been deployed to production and it wouldn't be a green circle. Again, I messed that up. So that's what you should see, something different there. But the key things I wanted to point out, actually, I'm going to use Dub Grub beta because this is where I did make some mistakes. And these are the mistakes that I'm going to try to, warn you against. So I'm in my Dub Grub beta. If I go to my schema, right, go to record types, and then DDG location. So the main thing to keep in mind before you push to production is that your record fields, right now we have like address, description, latitude, location, whatever. You cannot edit or delete these existing properties after you've pushed to production. Like if you look on the right here, my delete signs are grayed out. I can't hit them. You should still be able to delete stuff because you haven't deployed to production yet. But the reason why this is a kind of a big deal, at least to me, because I don't like the clutter and the messiness. The reason you can't delete or edit existing fields is because if you have an app out in production, your users are relying on that field to be there. So if you delete or change it, it's going to break the app. The app's going to crash. So they don't let you do that. However, you're not like stuck. Of course, you can always add new fields to make new changes. And that's kind of what you can see I did in my beta. I wasn't sure how I was going to handle address. So I did the address, I did address, city, state, zip, I did address, just street. But you can see I had made these changes after I had already deployed to production. So when I did decide on just a basic address, I couldn't go back and delete these old fields. Now, not the end of the world. Your app's not going to break. However, you can imagine, a year of development, if you keep messing stuff up like this, your database is going to be cluttered with, fields that you're not even using anymore because you made a mistake. Another example of that is I used to have latitude and longitude as separate doubles before I discovered that, CloudKit has a location object that wraps all that, right? But now I can't go back and delete latitude and longitude. So you see how this clutter can build up. So you want to do an audit of your fields before you push to production. And you're checking for things like, hey, do I even still need this field? Spell check, right? Make sure you didn't misspell anything. Make sure this is the name you want, because again, you can't go back and change it. You would have to add a completely new field. So now let's leave Dub Grub beta. Let's go back to Dub Grub, which you don't have beta in Dub Grub, but I'm being very clear where I'm going. This Dub Grub is what we've been building together and what I pushed to production 20 minutes ago without recording my screen like an idiot. But let's pretend this wasn't pushed to production. So I would go to my record types on Dub Grub, DDG location. You can see these are different. It's more clean, like I didn't have all those mistakes. So you would just do a quick little audit. Like, are these the names I want? Did I misspell anything? Are there any fields I'm not using? Because again, this is your last chance to clean this up, get rid of all that stuff before pushing to production. Now let's scroll back up and do a double check. Go back to record types, do a double check of DDG profile. Again, you're looking for, spelling errors, making sure this is the name you want, making sure you don't have any fields you're not using. An example of that would be, how we use this is checked in nil check for our fix. Well, let's say hypothetically you did discover a better way to do it, or you decided to handle it a different way, and now you don't need this is checked in nil check. This is the time to go back and be like, oh, hey, we're not using that anymore. Let me delete it. And again, on the right, my deletions are grayed out because I am in production because I'm an idiot. Yours should not be grayed out at this point. So like I said, one last quick audit before you deploy to production. If that is good, which ours is already good, you're going to hit this button here. It says deploy schema changes. Click on that. And your screen should look different than mine right now because it says I have no changes because I just deployed to production. Yours should show you that, hey, we modified the user record. And if you click on it, it'll show you that we added the user profile reference. Yours will say, hey, we created a record called DDG location. And if you click on it, it'll show you the properties and types. It'll say, hey, we created a DDG profile. It's basically the changes that you made to the environment, which in our case, this is the first time we're pushing, is everything we've done. Subsequent pushes, say you're doing a 1.1 update to the app after it's already been released, that will be a diff of the new changes, right? But for right now, it's everything we've done because it's our first time. So you would hit deploy. I'm not going to do that. Now, when I did the Dub Grub beta, I don't know if something was messed up or if this is typical, but it took like 20 minutes to show up for me. So if it takes a little bit longer for you, don't worry, just giving you the context of how long that took. For me, I've had to take the time to calm down from the anger of not recording my screen the first time and re-recording this video. So mine should be up, but let's take a look here. So you see this drop down development. If you switch from development to production, this is how you flip between the two environments. So I'm going to go to production to check out my production database here. Okay, my record types are here. So again, when I was did this the first time on my beta, my record types weren't showing up. I couldn't click into them and look at them. So if that's happening to you, just give it some time, because I even put out a tweet saying, what is going on? And then of course, as soon as I tweeted it, it showed up. Never fails, so I had to delete the tweet. But anyway, here is our record fields. Now, here's the thing. Production is a clean slate database. So when I go to records, right, my DDG locations, we're in the public database, DDG location, query records, there's nothing here. So that's another note, is you have to re-enter all your DDG locations and all that data. But it's a good lesson, because something to keep in mind, we only have 8 locations, so it's not that bad. But you can imagine if you're building an app that had 80 locations or something like that. Man, loading those in all again, you probably don't want to do that. So what I would recommend is on your development environment, you would want to maybe only bring in 8 to 10 if you had 80, and then save that huge import for when you're actually doing your production app. Because you should be able to test your app on 8 to 10 locations. You shouldn't need all 80 for that. So that'll save you a little bit of time. So I'm going to do the data entry for one location just to refresh your memory. And of course, I'll link to the spreadsheet so you can do that yourself, but I'm not going to make you watch me import all 8 of them. But just so you know, you have to bring in all your locations again, which we did before, so it should be review. And again, I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet, which will be linked. Let's do Scott Seafood. So I'm going to copy the name back to the records. Well, first I got to create new record. So my name is Command V on Scott Seafood. Back to the spreadsheet, my description, Command C, back to the records. Again, I'm only doing this once. We're not going to do this for all 8, but I do want to refresh your memory just in case you forgot, how to do this. We'll copy the street address back to records, where it is address up top, Command V, and then we'll go to latitude, copy, back to records, latitude, longitude, back to the record, website, back to the records, that's down here. Spreadsheet, phone number is the last thing. We got to bring in our assets. Can't forget that. Command V. And go to Finder for our location images. And again, I'll link to these on this video just in case, I don't know, you don't have them anymore. So we're at Scott Seafood. So I can do Scott Square, drag that there. That should upload. No? Come on, help me out here. No? Okay, I guess I'll do choose file. Go to my location images. We'll do Scott's Square, upload. There we go. Now I'll go up to banner, choose file, Scott's banner. There we go. Upload that. Make sure we have everything. Cool, cool, cool. Hit save. Close this out. Now when we query records, now we see Scott Seafood, we have that. So go ahead and do that for all the videos. Again, I'm going to edit out me doing that. All right, so now I've got all my data entered. Let's double check though, right? Look at DDG profile. We see nothing here, right? So when I run the app for the first time, pointing at this production database, I'm gonna have to create a new profile. Again, it's like a brand new clean slate. Now, when you push to test flight or push to App Store, that automatically points to production. However, in Xcode, you're going to be pointing to the development environment, but we can make a change so we can switch back and forth because, situationally, you may need to test against production. Maybe you're fixing a bug, or, you may want to be developing in the development environment if you're working on a major new big feature, right? There's various reasons why you'd want to bounce back and forth between the environments after it's already been pushed to production. And again, you're building version 1.1, 1.2, like later in the development life. That's the big picture, right? When you're building initially, like we have been this whole course, you definitely want to be in the development environment. And then when you're ready to, launch your version 1.0, do what we're doing right now, convert to production, but do another round of testing on production before you push to test flight, just to make sure everything's good. And if you're creating, extra locations or extra profiles, you can delete the profiles. So if I go back to, DDG location, hit query records, you can see if I click on one, like I can still delete records. So if you're creating extra test profiles, even on production, you can go back and clean up a little bit. But you definitely want to do one last round of testing on production before you make that push to, test flight or the App Store. Okay, so let's head back to Xcode because we're going to add an entitlement that'll allow us to switch between development and production. So back in Xcode, we haven't touched anything yet, but I want to show you when we run this, it's going to automatically point to development. Like this should look no different than it has been our whole time, right? We got 5 people checked into Chipotle, all of our stuff, right? Same thing we had. Now, in order for us to flip to production, we need to add an entitlement that allows us to do that. So let's stop running this. Okay, down here on the left, I'm going to minimize all my folders, right? Just to make it not so cluttered. But you see right below views, we have Dub Grub entitlements. And apologies if that's a little small. I have my resolution blown up as big as it goes. But just like our plist is, we can add an entitlement. So I'm going to hit plus here. And then the entitlement I want to add, and I'm going to have this in the description so you can copy and paste it as well. So I'm going to paste it here, but it's com.apple.developer.iCloud container environment. And then this needs to be a string. And the value we give it, if you want to point it to production, is production. Make sure you spell it correctly. Hit return. And then now when we run this on the iPhone 12 Pro, I should go to production and we should basically see a clean slate. All of our locations look the same. There's nobody checked into Chipotle. And when I click on Chipotle, nobody's there. And I thought there was a reason we had that spacer below. I didn't test this afterwards, so we're gonna go back and fix that as well in this video. But there's a reason we had that spacer we cleaned up in the optimization because it does push everything up to the top when nobody's there. I knew there was a reason. So anyway, we'll dismiss that. We'll fix that in a second. But so I believe I'm in production, right? If I go to my profile, I don't have a profile, right? Because new database. So I'm going to create one, and then we'll check our production environment, to make sure it's up there. So we'll do Sean, last name will be production, just to like prove that. Let's get our images here, or our profile picture. We'll do the white Dub Grub. Cool, we'll choose that. There we go. Characters. This is my production profile, whatever. Now hit, I need a company name. Company name is production, just to really be sure. Hit create profile. Profile created successfully. Cool. Now let's double check that in Safari. Make sure we are on our production database up here. Records, public database, DDG location. Let's go to DDG profile. Hit query records. I should see what I just created. Yep, bio, this is my production, company name production, Sean, Okay, so again, we are pointing to production. Got to be careful with this though, because you want to make sure you flip back and forth when needed. And the reason you want to be careful is because, like I said, you're working in the production environment. So what we just did to test it, like creating a new user, that's not going to harm existing users. However, if we were messing with our locations for some reason on production, right? If I went to DDG location, let's say within our app, we were messing with our locations, which we don't have the ability to do in our app, but hypothetically say you did, you wouldn't want to test that in production because that's going to show up to your real users. I guess one example that would work in our app is, let's say the user we just created, I just named it like test user, and then I was testing checking into Chipotle. Well, you might not want to do that because now your real users would see something called test user actually checked into Chipotle like it was a real person. So be careful how you use, working in production. I'm not saying you should always do that. The reason I'm showing you how to do this is because there are certain scenarios where you will need to test against production or test against development. So I wanted to show you how to switch back and forth between the two. And again, back in Xcode, it is in your entitlements. This entitlement here, which I'll include in the description, so you can copy paste, make it a string, production, and then let's stop running this. And then we'll go back to development, hit return. And then now when I run it, we should be back to development where we see, 5 people checked into Chipotle in all of our old stuff. There you go. There's 5 people checked into Chipotle. Now when I click on this, again, that spacer at the bottom isn't needed here, but our people are checked in. This is back to what we've been working on. Let me click on Grace's Deli. Yeah, so we get that. So let me fix that real quick before we wrap up the video. Stop that. Make sure we're in development, because I think that's what you want to default to. I think you want to default to development and then only flip to production when you absolutely need to, and then make sure you flip back, right? With great power comes great responsibility. Keep that in mind. So anyway, views, location, detail view. And then I want a spacer below this, because again, that spacer at the bottom just pushes everything up to the top no matter what. Maybe there's a better way to do it. I think we might have to live with that little space at the bottom. So let me check on Chipotle, right? Well, not here. Let me go to actually the list. Chipotle. Yeah, we're going to have to deal with that little space right there. But when I go to something like Grace's Deli, when it's empty, everything is still pushed back up, which is the way we want. So if you have a better way to fix that, happy to hear it, but we do need that spacer for when it's empty. So that wraps up pushing to production. If you have any questions, leave some comments. In the next video, we're actually going to push this thing to test flight. Now that we've deployed to production, let's push this thing up to test flight. But because of the bundle ID being unique, I can only demonstrate pushing this up to test flight for real once. Like I get one shot at it. And due to the timing of this, because it's late July when I'm filming this, Xcode 12 is on its last leg, right? Xcode 13 is only a few weeks away. So for the sake of future-proofing this course, I'm going to wait till Xcode 13 is official in a few weeks. Then I'm going to come back and do the official upload of Dub Grub. Again, that's just to future-proof it so it's updated for Xcode 13, and that will last, a year or so. So what I'm going to do here is I have a YouTube video I did just a few months ago on how to upload an app to test flight in Xcode 12. And it's essentially the same video that I would make right now. There's one difference when we get to the capabilities part where you have to make sure you check, hey, I'm using iCloud and I'm using Maps. Because you'll see in the video, there's a whole list of capabilities you could check, things like Health Kit, Game Center, like all the stuff that iOS apps can do. Well, in the video that I show you, we don't check any of them because it's a simple app we're uploading. And I'll notate this in the video because I'm going to go back and edit it a bit to let you know, like, hey, here's where you need to check Maps. Here's where you need to check iCloud. So that's my makeshift solution before Xcode 13 comes out, because again, I can only upload this thing for real once, and I want to do that on Xcode 13 for the sake of future proofing. So with that said, on to the existing video on how to upload an app in Xcode 12. And if you have any questions, definitely leave a comment. I'll be happy to jump in and help. Today I'm going to walk you through how to upload your iOS app to TestFlight so you can beta test your app with outside users, right? You can send them a link, send them an email, just start getting users testing your app before you launch. Okay, so here we are in Xcode. We're looking at the Appetizers app that I build in my SwiftUI Fundamentals course. You can check that out, link in the description if you're interested, but we're just using that as like the sample app because I'm going to walk you through like in real time actually uploading it. Now, this does start off with two assumptions. I think they're pretty safe assumptions, but one, that you have an Apple ID. If you have an iPhone, you have an Apple ID, so hopefully we're good there. And then two, that you have an Apple developer account. So if you haven't signed up for that yet and you're about to beta test your app, it's probably a good time to do that anyway, but I want to let you know that this tutorial will assume that you have an Apple ID and you're signed up for the Apple developer program. Okay, so here we are looking at Xcode, but we actually don't start in Xcode. I just wanted to give you like a visual of the project here. We actually start on the internet, the website here. Go to Safari, developer.apple.com. Now, when you first go there, you're gonna have to sign in. I skipped that part on the video, so you didn't see like my login, password information, all that stuff. But once you get logged into your developer.apple.com, you're gonna see this page, except it's gonna say your name on it. One quick point, if you have been doing this for a little bit, double check your teams. I've done this plenty of times where I've created an app for the wrong team. Click this down arrow. You know, if you've done contracting or if you've worked for companies, you may have different teams, but make sure you have the proper team. That is Sean Allen. So the first thing we have to do is create an app ID for our app. So you can either hit this giant button that says certificates, identifiers, and profiles, or you can hit this one over here, certificates, IDs, and profiles. Click on that. You're going to see some certificates, but click on identifiers over here on the left. And now these are our app identifiers. You're going to see some old apps that I haven't touched in a while. Maybe you have some, maybe you don't. Either way, you want to hit the plus button next to identifiers because we're going to create a new one. Again, we want an app ID. Hit continue. We want an app, not an app clip, I'm assuming. Hit continue. And here we can do a quick description. I'll say Swift UI Appetizers. And here we're going to do a bundle ID. Now, if we go back to Xcode, back to our project here, click on the project, target here, you see the bundle identifier. It's usually the reverse of your website, like seanallen.co is my website, so co.seanallen, but do your website, don't do mine. You're going to want to use like your website or something to uniquely identify you as well. And you had to create this when you like created your project. So what I do is I just go into my project, what I already created, do a Command C to copy. Let's go back to Safari, Command V to paste it right in there. There you go. So co.seanallen.appetizers. And then now we have the option to select our capabilities, right? If you're doing something like ClassKit, HomeKit, HealthKit, right? Anything you're using in your app, sign in with Apple, Siri Kit, you want to check the capabilities. This app doesn't have any of that. Pretty simple app, so we're not going to check any capabilities. Go ahead and hit continue. And then we're going to like confirm your Apple ID. So we're just going to kind of confirm the information we put in or didn't put in for our capabilities. Yep, we got our bundle ID. That's right. Hit register. Cool. Now you see in our list here, we have the appetizers one down here kind of towards the bottom. So we just created that. So that's step one, and that is in your developer.apple.com account. So just creating the app ID. Now we need to go to App Store Connect to actually create the app on the App Store in TestFlight. So up here in your internet bar, do appstoreconnect.apple.com. You're going to come here. You may have to sign in. Okay, mine automatically logged me in. You may get a login screen. Again, just sign in with your Apple ID. No big deal. Mine went past that. So here, right, if you had apps on the App Store, you can kind of guess here. You can get your app analytics, your sales. This is where you're like, this is like your headquarters for apps on the App Store. We want to go to My Apps. And here you'll see some apps I haven't touched in a while. You may have some there, but you want to hit the plus button next to apps because we're going to create a new one of these, new app. Okay, we want iOS. Of course, if tvOS applies to you, check tvOS. We want this to be called Appetizers. Language, I'm going to do English, US. Again, make this applicable to you if it's different. Bundle ID. Okay, you see we're going to get a drop down. You can't like type something in. This is what we just created, right? We just created SwiftUI Appetizers, right? We just created that last step. Okay, SKU or SKU. This just needs to be unique for you in your app, in your like app library. Meaning if you had 10 apps, like you were a very prolific developer, you just want this to be unique because like when you look at some of your sales reports and stuff like that, it's going to be sorted by SKU. So just make this unique. I usually do like the name and then like the date that I put on here, right? Like 01/20/21, right? And then full access. This is if you have a whole team, like you're on a big company that has an App Store Connect account, you can limit access, who has access to this. So hit create. Okay, yep, that name, I thought that when I typed that. This name is already being used. Appetizers, right? That's pretty common name. Of course, if you are actually releasing this, put more thought into this. I'm just going to put -SA because this is not going on the App Store. I am just doing this for video purposes. Okay, now that we created it, you may have to hit refresh. Okay, we hit refresh. Now I have my appetizers-SA app. Click on that, and now this is our App Store homepage. So spoiler alert, we talked about doing this for test flight, but if you were just actually uploading this to the App Store, do the same thing, do that whole creation process. You can see the App Store tab here that's selected. You can see I can enter my screenshots, my promotional text, description. This is all the stuff you do to actually upload your app to the App Store. However, of course, we want test flight. So you'll see test flight has builds. You see over here, no builds. Upload a build using one of several tools, Xcode being one of those tools. So we have done the initial setup for our app to get it kind of registered with the App Store. Now we need to take whatever build we want our beta testers to test, and we need to upload that build to the App Store. So to do that, we go back to Xcode. I was just there. Okay, cool. So here I am in Xcode. Let's take a look at versioning real quick because this defaults to 1.0 for your app. Typically 1.0 is your first ever official release. So your first beta, you probably don't want that to be 1.0. I usually do something like 0.1.0, something called semantic versioning. You can Google that to get details. Pretty common way to version your software. But essentially what I would do, right, in future versions of the beta, maybe that's 0.2.0, 0.3.0, or whatever. And then when I'm ready to officially launch, I upgrade that to 1.0.0, right? And you can kind of see how that works. One quick note on versionings and builds. So if you change your version number, say this was the next one and I wanted to go to 0.2.0, you're gonna have to go through test flight's little mini review process, and that could take a day, 2 days, a couple hours. However, if you keep the same version number and you just increment the build from 1 to 2, that is going to be instant approval. So for super small changes that you want your beta testers to have instant access to, go ahead and do that. Anything major you need to go through approval again, change your version number. Just a quick note on that. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to build 1. So now that you have your version number properly set up, we wanna archive our build. So you have to archive it so you can upload it. How do you archive it? Well, in the product menu, you'll see archive, but it's grayed out. You may see this a lot because if you have a simulator selected, right? I have iPhone 12 Pro, you're not gonna be able to archive from the simulator. You either have to have your real device plugged in, which I don't have my device connected. So if you don't have your device plugged in, you can choose this any iOS generic one, right? And then you can do product archive. So again, either your real device or that generic one. Now archive is lit up and we can archive our project. Now this is probably gonna go pretty quick because this is a pretty light app and I'm on an iMac Pro. If you have a big app, maybe an older computer, archiving could take a while. Your fans will spin up. It's a pretty heavy process normally, just a heads up on that. But as you can see, mine finished pretty quickly. Again, super light app. So here's my archive. Now, this is a list of all your archives. So say this was the 7th beta build I did, I would see 6 subsequent archives. So make sure you pick the right one when you go to distribute. We only have one here right now, but just a heads up for future reference, right? So click the archive that you just did and it should match whatever version number and build number you did. A quick note, if you forget to update your version number or build number, when you go to upload, it'll reject it and say, nope, this version build number already exists. Change your version number or build number. So something to keep in mind. Okay, so here's a giant red or whatever color your accent color is, distribute app button, click on that. Okay, we want App Store Connect, right? As you can see, distribute on test flight and the App Store. Some other options like enterprise, distribute to your organization. An example of that is if you work at a very large company and you have an internal app that's not on the App Store, you would use that, but we're focused on App Store Connect right now. Hit next. I guess we want to upload it. And then we get 2 options, include bitcode and then upload your app symbols. So basically bitcode, as you can read in the description, right? You can take advantage of hardware, software, compiler changes. So you probably want to do that. And then uploading your app symbols so you can receive symbol-cated reports from Apple. Symbol-cated is just a fancy word for translated. So what happens here with your crash reports? Say you're beta testing your app, your beta tester gets a crash, they submit a crash report. If you're not symbol-cated, it's just going to be machine code that you can't read. If you're able to symbol-cate that crash report, which you're uploading your app symbol so you can do that, it'll print it out more human readable, and it'll kind of look like your stack trace, right? Where you can see what function it crashed on to help you narrow it down. So you probably want to upload your app symbols. Hit next. Okay, code signing. Talk to any developer that's been doing this for a long time. They've probably spent a ton of time in provisioning profile, certificate hell. It's a major pain in the ass. If you are just a new app, you're a solo developer, absolutely do automatically managed signing. Stick with that. If you're on an older app, and I say older because this automatically managed signing option is relatively new, Xcode 9 or 10, could be a little bit off on that, but it's relatively new. So if you're on an older app, this wasn't even an option. So again, if you're on an older app or if you're on a larger team, you may want to manually manage your profiles and certificates and all that stuff. But again, just you, new app, hit next on automatic. Okay, so we get the notification that there's no Apple distribution certificate for Sean Allen. A certificate is required for App Store Connect distribution. So anytime you distribute an app, because this is the first time I've uploaded this app to the App Store or test flight, we got to do this. You're not going to have to do this on subsequent archives, but first time we have to generate a certificate, right? You need that distribution certificate to distribute your app, and it's unique, right? So yes, we want to generate this. Hit next. And you can also do this in developer.apple.com, but this is kind of like Xcode doing it for us. So what this is a certificate, and one note, it stays locally on your machine. And I want to point this out because this trips a lot of people up. If you have an older laptop and then you get a new laptop, you're going to have some certificate issues because your certificate's on the old laptop. So anyway, just a heads up there. Go ahead and hit export signer certificate because you do want to save this somewhere. I'm going to call this appetizers cert. Name it whatever you want. And you do want to put a password on it, whatever password you like, because if it's just you may not have to do this, but when you're on a team, whoever has the distribution certificate has to give it to another teammate so that teammate can also upload builds to the App Store. And when you do that, you got to give them the password and all that. That's probably beyond this, but we'll go ahead and save. And there it is. You can see it's saved, the certificate. That's what it looks like. It's a .p12 file. Close that out. Hit next. Okay, now it's looking at my keychain. Go ahead and enter your whatever password you have for your computer. Cool, here we go. We have the summary. This is just the last thing you do before you upload. You can check it, right? You can see it's on my certificate. It generated the provisioning profile for me. You can see any entitlements you have, all that stuff. But here's where you hit upload. And then once you do this, it just starts uploading to the App Store. And then we're done with this phase. So hit upload. You can see you get the nice upload bar, making sure everything's going good, right? Sent API usage to App Store Connect, waiting for response. Sometimes this will fail here if you mess something up. Authenticating with the App Store. Hopefully you have your profiles right. I'm doing all this in real time. I can't test this, right? Because it would already be on the App Store. So I'm hoping everything's good. Okay, it's uploading. So we're good. Okay, wasn't expecting this, but it looks like after reading these errors that I have to have an app icon to upload to test flight. I don't know if this is new or not, but I've uploaded plenty of apps to test flight that didn't quite have their app icon yet. But all these errors are saying does not have the app icon, does not have the app icon. So I'm going to go ahead and fix this, and we'll be right back, and I'll explain what I did. Okay, so what I did here, because I'm doing this on the fly, I didn't have an app icon for that app because, again, I was not expecting this. But in case you run into this, you just go to your assets catalog, your app icon, and then there's various different app icons you can have. You can see 20 point, 29 point, 40 point, 60 point, and you need a 2x, 3x, 1x version of it. There's a lot of programs out there like Sketch or so-and-so that will export all these versions for you. But if you don't have that, you can manually create them, but it'll give you all the dimensions you have. So if you need to import an app icon, here you go. That's how you did it. Okay, so now if we click on Window in Organizer, this is the window that shows the our archives. Okay, so we want to hit Done. This is upload failed. You see that right there? So make sure you're in this window. Let's delete this archive because remember this archive didn't have the app icons, right? So we can't just try to re-upload that. We're going to run into the same issue. So hit delete. But like I said, I'm keeping this in because rarely does this process go smooth. You're always going to run into hiccups. So hopefully these hiccups will kind of help you in your, maybe you run into the same thing. So now we want to do this over again. Product, archive. Again, you'll see it go. That window will pop up again. We just did this a little bit ago. Cool. Here's our new archive. And again, they're timestamped. So if you do them on the same day and then the same build number, you can check it. Now let's hit distribute app. I'm going to go through this quicker because it's the same stuff. Cool. App Store Connect. Yes. Upload. Yep. We want to include bitcode and symbols. We want to automatically manage signing. Okay. We have to basically allow them into our keychain so they can check our cert. Cert's good to go. Here's the, overview. Hit upload. It's going to communicate with Apple, authenticate. Last time the bar was almost full and then it yelled at me about my app icons. Hopefully we don't run into any other issues. Again, I can't test this because it would already be on test flight. So it's always a crapshoot. We'll see. Okay, there you go. Successfully uploaded, right? Getting that green check mark, always a great thing. Okay, so now we can hit done. We're pretty much done with Xcode. Let's go back to Safari or whatever internet, right? Test flight, builds, right? I said we had no builds. Please upload a build. Hit refresh, and you should see one, hopefully. Yep, see version 1.0. It should say processing. Okay, yeah, I had to refresh to get that to show up. So you can see build 1, processing. Now, processing can take 5 minutes, 20 minutes. I've had it take 6 hours. This is always a bit of a variable. Okay, let's hit refresh to see if we're done processing. Again, this could take a while, could take a few minutes, a couple hours. Cool, we're done processing. That was faster than expected. If it took you longer, don't worry about it. Okay, so you're gonna see this missing compliance. This is always here, hit manage. This is about like encryption, right? To make sure you're properly encrypting, right? Does your app use encryption? Select yes if your app only uses the standard encryption within Apple's operating system. So hit yes. Pretty much everything's encrypted, especially if you're using like HTTPS network calls. Yep, so hit yes, and it kind of sucks because you have to, right? It is your responsibility to comply with export regulations, and you should revisit these questions if your encryption or exemption status changes. Basically, you have to fill out a form at the end of the year to submit, right? If you are making use of ATS or making call to HTTPS, you are required to submit a year-end self-classification report to the government. Learn more. Not going to dive into that in this video. Go ahead and hit learn more. Do your own research on that one because I don't want to tell you something with government submissions and like have that mess up. So just know that you hit yes for your encryption and then you're going to have to submit a form. Learn more about that. So you can hit start internal testing. So now internal testing means like your App Store Connect users. This could be other developers on your team that are helping out build, but this is not like external users. For external testers, the ones that you just want to give a link to or email, hit the little plus next to external groups and say first beta. You can name this whatever you want. This is just a unique name for you to identify the group. I'm going to call it first beta testers, hit create. And then now you can see, right, you're in your first beta testers kind of like dashboard. So now that we've created like our user group, let's go back to the main test flight page and hit ready to submit or click on the 1, right, to get into your actual build. And here you go, test details, what to test. You know, let your testers know what you would like them to test. You know, test the whole app, right? If this is a subsequent build and there's unique stuff they want to test, this is where you would tell them. And then you can add a group here. So hit plus next to the group, first beta testers, that's what we just created. Hit next. So this is like the feedback email. So if your users wanted to send feedback about the beta, this is the email you give them. And then the contact information, right? Sean, Allen, I'm not putting my real phone number in there. 123, 123, 1234. Put your phone number in there. And again, this is for like Apple reviewers to like contact you for some reason, right? Whereas this first feedback email is for like the users. So we're gonna do the same email here, but that feedback email might be something like help@yourwebsite.com, you know? And then if there is a sign-in required, you have to give them like a dummy username and password, right? That's what you would put there. There's no sign-in required for my app. Hit next. And then again, let your users know what to test. I thought I already did that. Test the whole app. Submit for review. And then now this is going to be submitted for review. And if we go back to our test flight dashboard here, right? It says waiting for review. This is what could take like 1 to 2 days, maybe a couple hours. And this is what's going to happen if you up your version number. But if you just up your build number, it'll automatically go. But what's going to happen after the review is done, again, might be a day, it'll say ready to test. And then you would go into your beta testers group, and then you add a build to it, right? So right now, there's no build added to this group. Like here's a build, but it's waiting for review. You'll see that you can add this build here. You can add a public link and everything once that's done reviewed. And through the magic of editing, I'm going to stop filming right now and start again when this is done being reviewed, and then we can walk through the final steps. All right, for you, that was an instant. For me, it's actually a couple days later by the time I got around to recording this. But the actual approval, as you can see here, that took about 24 hours for my beta build to get approved. I've seen it take a little longer. I've seen it take shorter, but just a heads up, it could take a little bit. But we are approved. And if you notice this right below it, right, I'll make it a little bigger here. Command plus, approved. Expires in 86 days. So test flight builds last 90 days. So if you don't upload a new build, your beta is going to expire in 90 days. So keep that in mind if you have like a long running beta that you're going to have to be putting up new builds at least every 90 days. All right, let's do Command minus to get my left sidebar back here. Okay, so now that we have an approved build, we need to attach that to a group of testers. If you remember, we created our external group, first beta testers, right? Right now we have no testers, but you see we can enable a public link. So let's talk about this first. I'm going to click enable public link. Are you sure you want to enable this link? Anyone with the link will be able to install your app on their device and share the link with others. Enable. So now I have this link right here, and this is what you would want to only send out when you're ready for any and all users, right? The process of beta testing, usually you do it, to a couple users at first in the beginning, the early betas. Usually this blasted out to everybody to test happens later in the beta cycle, because again, this is what you would tweet out, you would put on social media, you would try to get as many as possible. That is when you would use the public link. However, you don't have to send the link out to people, of course. If you do want just a nice closed beta test with maybe 10 of your friends and family, whatever, that's where you hit add testers and add new testers. Now remember, we're on our group. You can have various group, right? You could have a friends group, a family group, potential users group. You can break this down however you want. As you can see, we're adding new testers to the group first beta testers. That's just the random name I came up with. So email is required. This is an old email of mine. Feel free to spam it if you want. I don't even use it anymore. Hence, it's a Yahoo account. Sean Allen, right? And hit add. So there you go. One tester has been added to this group. As you can see, here's my testers, and it's cool. You can see I've been invited, but I haven't downloaded it yet. And you can see number of sessions, crashes, feedback, etc. So that's it. Your app is out there beta testing. Of course, your users, what's going to happen? This user is going to get an email that will tell them how to download TestFlight if they need to. If you're not aware, TestFlight is an app from the iOS App Store that you can download. Your beta testers are going to have to do that, but the email they get will explain all that to them. Same thing when they tap on this link right here, if you send that to them. And then in the future, as you update your builds with new beta builds, they'll just get a notification in the TestFlight app that, hey, this beta has a new build. So anyway, that's getting your app up on TestFlight. If you have any questions about beta testing, feel free to leave them in the comments. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you in the next one. All right, let's update this project to iOS 15. And in this video, I'm going to do my best to simulate the process I go through when a new iOS version gets released and I have an existing project and I got to go in and update everything. That's kind of what we're going to simulate. And the major steps we're going to do is we're going to set our target to iOS 15. That way I get all the deprecations and warnings with the new language stuff. And then I fix and clear all those. And then we run the app to see if there's any UI bugs, UI issues, because usually with a new iOS version, they tweak the UI and you got to fix some stuff. So those are the major steps I go through whenever there's a brand new iOS version released. And that's what we're going to simulate here. So the first step in that, and those of you that have gone through the course for the first time, you may already be on iOS 15 here, but just in case you're not, you click the Dub Grub project, go to project here. You see our deployment target was iOS 14.5 when I originally did the course. And then now we want to go to iOS 15. Same thing with our target down here, iOS 15. And while we're here, let's unclick the iPad, landscape left, landscape right. If you've played around with the app, you know it doesn't work in landscape and you know it's not made beautiful for the iPad. Those are projects you can take on if you want to take this project and run with it and get some practice. But for the scope of this course, we're not messing with that. So we can click those off. Now that we are targeting iOS 15, right? Let's go back to our views here. I'll just pick a random view here, profile view. I'm going to do a Command B, and that should build it with iOS 15. And then you see I get some warnings here. So this is the first step I do. I'm like, all right, let me clear the warnings, because big picture, I want my project to be at a clean slate before I start adding new iOS 15 stuff. So that's why, again, I go fix the UI bugs, I clear the warnings the best I can, and then I start adding new stuff. So let's click on the warnings. Okay, there's a bunch of them here. And you'll notice a lot of them are in CloudKit Manager. Let's click on this, right? It says these are deprecated. Well, you click on this, right? It was deprecated in iOS 15. It was renamed to this, yada, yada, yada. You can see anywhere we're using the CloudKit operation, and you can see it's in a bunch of places. Now, real quick, when it comes to all these CloudKit warnings, I explored this because, again, normally, even though I know I'm rewriting pretty much our entire CloudKit layer with the new async await stuff, which is coming in a future video, I still would want to clear this if they were just simple name changes. Again, just to start with a clean slate. But, to spare you, I explored this, and it turns out we have to rewrite this code a little bit. And because I know I'm completely gutting this whole thing and rewriting it, that would be a waste of time. So we are going to live with these CloudKit warnings, again, because I know I'm rewriting basically the whole thing. So the only warning we had, these are all CloudKit ones on the left, is this animation was deprecated in iOS 15. Okay, so this is one I will fix. So the fix for this, right, is basically you could add an animation modifier, as you see here, onto any view. And that was causing some unexpected behavior in certain cases. It didn't really affect us, but this is why they fixed it. So I'm going to get rid of that animation there. Now the solution, well, let me Command Z so you can see what the warning says, right? Give me the warning back. It says animation was deprecated in iOS 15. Use animation or animation value instead. I always like to option click on the code itself, open in developer documentation, because most of the time it'll say deprecated and it'll point you to what you should use. So we're going to use this with animation, and then I always click on that to review it and see what it does, and just to get a feel for like the new code that I'm using. However, this code has been in here for a while, so this is old SwiftUI code. No big deal. So we'll go back to deleting this animation. And then the trick here, right, or just for context, this is us presenting our DDG profile modal. You know, it slides in from the left and then slides out. That's the animation we're dealing with. So I want to go to my location detail view, because this is where we're showing the modal, I believe. Yes, if view model is showing profile modal, right, this is when we like show it and animate it. So we need to find out where we're changing this Boolean, right? Because that's how we show this modal, right? If is showing profile equals true, then we show it, right? So where are we flipping this? Well, that is when we tap on one of our avatar's faces. Okay, so that's down here in our grid view. And I'm kind of going through this quickly because I assume most of you just took this course. Apologies if you are coming back after a few months of taking it to check it out. You might have to refresh yourself a little bit. But here in our avatar grid view, remember we refactored this out. Here's our first name avatar view. On tap gesture, we're showing the profile. So in our tap gesture, and again, I gotta get rid of my one-liner. So sad for me. I can do with animation, hit return there, and just move this into here. And I am gonna salvage it a little bit by making that a one-liner. Again, this code style, pure preference, but as you can see, this is already getting like deeply nested. So I like to use the one-liners as much as I can. Okay, so now as I'm fixing my deprecations, my warnings, my errors, I like to test the app to make sure we're, still working. Now at this point, I may see some UI issues and I make some note of it, but I'm not worried about fixing the UI issues yet. I want to clear all my warnings and deprecations before I go and fix the UI. Now, another thing to note is that we got new simulators with the new Xcode 13. Again, if you've taken the course from the beginning before coming back to this section, you've probably already been on the iPhone 13, so you're already signed in. Me, I did the course on the iPhone 12. I'm coming back for the updates. So for us with Xcode 13, this is a brand new simulator. So look, we got to see the onboard screen again because it's a new phone essentially. So that's good, that's working. And I'm gonna have to sign in, allow once. And I'm gonna have to sign in to my iCloud account again, because again, this simulator is like a brand new phone. So if you're coming back for the updates, you're gonna have to do that. If you've been taking the course from the beginning, you're probably already signed in, but I'm gonna go sign in real quick. Okay, now that I'm signed into the simulator in iCloud, let's click on Chipotle here and click on one of our users. We'll click on dummy. There's the animation, it slides in and it slides out. So the behavior doesn't change at all, which is fine. We just cleared the deprecation. And again, we're using the new or I shouldn't say new, this has been around since the beginning of SwiftUI, but they deprecated the other way to do animation. So we did it that way. Cool, so that was clearing the one warning. And look, the rest of this stuff is CloudKit. Now, we're not completely off the hook. Let me back up a second and talk about deprecations and how they work. So when Apple deprecates stuff, like you saw with that animation block, they usually give you 1, 2, 3 years to do it. So you'll first hear about the deprecation. Cool. Your code will still work. You don't have to change it. But what the warning will say, like if I click on this, right, you'll see, okay, it doesn't say it here, but usually it'll say like in a future version of iOS, this won't work. They don't tell you which version, but basically some point in the future, this code is no longer going to work. But like I said, it's usually a couple years. I recommend clearing your deprecations ASAP so you're not caught off guard in a couple years, but I do want to give you the big picture that it's not paramount that you fix them right away. I just like to stay on top of things. And on that note, if you just went by the warnings, you would think you were good. Again, minus all this CloudKit stuff that we're going to handle. And that's because, like I said, Apple gives you plenty of warnings. Some deprecations are more important than the others. So this is what I do. I pull up this list, and I'll link to this in the description. You can see deprecated modifiers. This is for SwiftUI. And I just scroll through this list, and you can see a lot of this is the accessibility stuff that we already went through in the accessibility course. But you go through and look at stuff, right? Like, okay, overlay. That is something we use in our app. So I go through and look for stuff that we're using. And I'm going to show you this list once. I'm not going to keep going back and forth. To show you how I got this stuff, I went through this list, look for everything we're using, like accent color. We're going to fix this. I click on accent color and it'll tell me, right? Okay, use the asset catalogs, accent color, or tint. It'll point you in the right direction on what to use. But anyway, this list is very handy when a new iOS comes out. I'll link to that in the description. But back to Xcode. From here, I'm just going to go through the stuff that I know. So the first thing, again, was accent color. And again, I want to be very clear. It's not like the end of the world if you miss something, right? During these initial deprecations. Trust me, Xcode will let you know with warnings when it's about to like not work anymore. But like I've said a bunch, I like to stay on top of things. So this accent color in our tab view right here, right? How our tab bar is like that brand primary. Well, now this accent color has been moved to our asset catalog. You see we have accent color up here. Well, I'm just going to basically make this the same as the brand primary. So I'm going to do click on brand primary, open up the right pane, go to the inspector. You see, instead of floating point, I'm going to get the 8-bit hexadecimal. You see, here's the code. Going to copy that and then go to accent color, click on the universal, go down to color, give me the sRGB, again, 8-bit hexadecimal, and we'll paste that in there, hit return. And appearances, we did any dark, even though it's the same color. This may be unnecessary, but oh well. Same thing as brand primary, but now our accent color will show that. So now if I go back to app tab view, I can delete this, get rid of that. I'll hit return on the search again. Location detail view. So here we can get rid of that. This is to make sure our navigation view's dismiss button is brand primary, right? To go with the color theme. We can get rid of that because our whole app's accent color is there. Location map view. Here, accent color, grub red. Now this is where we want to use tint. Kind of, it's not quite working, at least in the initial version of iOS 13 with a map. I think this is a UI bug because if I hold option, click on tint, where's my documentation button's not there. But it says it'll be small on your screen. It says use this method to override the default accent color. Okay, so that's what I want to do. However, you'll see this doesn't work, but we'll come back to that. And then our sheet here, again, with our dismiss button, has accent color brand primary. So again, the accent color in the assets is what basically makes the whole accent color for your entire app. But what that's going to do here when I run it is our location on our map, remember the dot was red? Well, now it's going to be our brand primary because that's our overall accent. And you would think, or at least what the documentation says, is that by making the map tint grub red, that overrides it. But you'll see it doesn't. Where's my location button? Why is this not showing my location? Maybe because, and again, new simulator, location, yep, see it's at Apple. I want custom location, and yes, that's the same numbers we already put in. So again, if you are coming back for the updates, you may have some new simulator issues like that where you got to set your location again. If you've gone through the course from the beginning, you probably already set this. So now you can see my location is green. Again, the tint should override that, but it's not. But you see our tab bar down here is working green. Let's check out our dismiss button here. Go to Chipotle. Look, our dismiss button up there. Cool, that is green. So the accent color is working except for the map. We'll go back to that here. So what I'm going to do is just go back to accent color. And again, this is kind of the point is Apple gives you a ton of time, one, for you to adopt it, right? Give developers time to adopt it. But two, when the first version of the iOS is released, the first version of Xcode released, there's a few bugs here and there. So I think tint might be a bug. Maybe it's not. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. But for now, I'm going to leave accent color. But you probably want to make a note like, hey, come back and change accent color. Or in a year or two, Xcode's going to give you a warning saying this was deprecated. But making that accent color for now will still keep the grub red so you can still have the appearance you want. Next on the deprecation list, and again, I just went through and saw this, but I'm saving some time here, is size category. If you remember what this was, this is how we determine what dynamic type they're using. Warning, this one's going to be a little tedious. A lot of copying and pasting here. So what the new, get rid of this right pane, get rid of this. Make this a little bigger. What's new in iOS 15 is size category is now changed to, right? It used to be content size category. That was the name of the type. Now it's dynamic type size. Makes much more sense, right? That's very obvious what that is now. So now I want to make this dynamic type size as the name. And then I'm going to copy, paste that there. And then you'll see here, dot accessibility medium no longer exists. You'll see I get dot large, accessibility 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they renamed these as well. These are not new. They just renamed them. Remember how we had, small, medium, large, and then there was a whole separate accessibility range. Well, that's what we were using. So accessibility 3 is medium. So just some renaming there. Do a Command B. This should work. We can't use the refactor rename because it's in a bunch of different scopes. It's not like one variable that we're changing everywhere. We're using this like a bunch. So I hit return in there to search for size category again, right? Size category is now Command V, dynamic type size. I'm pasting dynamic type size. And I do a Command B to let the warnings tell me where I'm using it. Paste it there. I guess you could in this file use rename everywhere, but I'm just going to go through. I find this just quicker. And then what I do, I click in the search, hit return again. That'll do another search and it'll get rid of all the stuff I've already changed. So here, size category is now dynamic type size. This one I got to type out because it's a capital D, dynamic type size. I told you this is going to be tedious. change size category to dynamic type size. And now accessibility medium is now .accessibility 3. Command B, get rid of all the errors and warnings on this screen. We're good. Okay, click into the search, hit return. Again, told you, tedious, but we'll get through it pretty quickly. Dynamic type size. Again, it's not size category, dynamic type size, and then accessibility 3. Now this is, what did we miss? Go back to the warning here. Okay, this is Command V, dynamic type size. Anywhere you see size category, dynamic type size. And again, I just, what we didn't, up here on line 201, we have to go to dynamic type size and dynamic type size. Now, like I said, you could probably do a find all, search, replace. I don't know, I like to go one by one and see where I'm using it. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I just know if I don't trust that, find all, replace all, because it's going to replace like the lowercase ones. I don't know if it'll replace the uppercase ones. I just like to be pretty thorough when I do this, because trust me, doing all this copy paste stuff can definitely lead to bugs if you aren't careful. Okay, another search here. Find this, dynamic type size, dynamic type size, dynamic type size, and then accessibility 3. Told you it's going to be tedious, but we're almost done. The preview. Okay, so this accessibility extra, extra large, this is going to be accessibility 5 now, right? That's the biggest accessibility. Clean up the naming a bit here. Hit return in the search. Okay, the list is dwindling. And then I'll type this one out so I get the capital dynamic type size. There you go. Size category. And then .accessibility 3, because that was accessibility medium. Do Command B. Are we done? Almost there. I think this is the last one here. And then size category is now dynamic type size, Command B. Okay, I think that's it. Now we'll do a search. Search should be done for size category. Cool, it's gone. Now I will run the app and we're going to change the dynamic type size and then just test like a screen or two to make sure, I didn't like break anything. Of course, this is an educational environment. If you actually had a real product out there, you would be running through this for a couple days with a fine-tooth comb. Of course, testing everything that you're changing. Again, for time's sake, I'm just going to test like a couple screens. So remember, if we go back to home, go over to settings, accessibility, display text size, larger text, larger accessibility size on. We'll go all the way to the top, right? For the biggest one, back. I guess we'll just hit home. Go back to Dub Grub, which we're running. Okay, remember we didn't mess with the map, right? We really messed with the location detail screen. So go to locations. This is all out of whack, that's fine. Location detail screen. Okay, we did change this one, right? So yes, this is working as we changed it and expected with dynamic type. Now again, real product, you would go through every screen, every possible iteration with a fine-tooth comb. For us, we're just gonna say, cool, that worked. And I didn't change my accessibility settings back. I'll go do that the next time I run it. Now, the next deprecation is presentation mode. So you'll notice we did this when we wanted to dismiss something. We're only using this in the onboard view. So this is now just called dismiss, and presentation mode just dismiss. And instead of, we'll do a Command B, we'll get an error where we're using it, right? Instead of presentation mode.wrap value.dismiss, it is now just dismiss. So do a Command B to get rid of that error. Before we test this one, I'll handle the last deprecation of an overlay. Remember, we used the overlay a couple times. So I hit this, and then oftentimes, like I said, you can either go to that deprecations list, or here, I'm like, okay, well, what's new with overlay? How do I write it now? So I'll option click on overlay, open in developer documentation, and you can see deprecated, and you can see all the deprecations, and it says use this instead. So then I'll click on that, and then I'll start looking at that. So essentially, what it is instead of having like a parentheses, it's just a cleaner way to do it. So I'll write it above it here. You just do overlay, and you see it was alignment and content. So hit return there. The alignment, as you see here on 47, was top trailing. So the alignment dot top trailing, and then the content, we can do an open and closed curly brace, and just put our button here. I'm going to rewrite it here. Button with a label. So just a small syntax change, but a little neater. And the label is the X dismiss button. And then the action is this with animation that we do here. So Command C, Command V. And then we can get rid of this overlay here. So this is showing our profile modal. So we'll test that and then do a Command B. Was that it? No, there's one more overlay down here, right? So this is our bio text editor. We'll look at this too. So our bio in our profile has that outline of the rounded rectangle. Well, now we will write it. There is no alignment, right? We're not messing with the alignment here. So now we'll do overlay, and now it's just in an open and closed curly brace. Again, super minor syntax change, but really gets rid of, see how there's like multiple parentheses? And it gets confusing when you have a complex overlay because there's just multiple parentheses everywhere. I think they just did this for the cleaner syntax of just having the open and close curly braces with that in there. So we'll delete that overlay, do a Command B, everything should be good, and then we'll test it. And testing this, we'll test our dismiss, where we change presentation mode to dismiss, and our overlays of our buttons, right? So let's run this and test that. Okay, yeah, like I said, I forgot to, let's go home. No, we're not gonna go home. Oh, hit allow once, go home. Forgot to go to settings, accessibility. Yeah, this is display and text size. This is hard to use. On, okay, get rid of those, and then we'll go back to the middle one, which I believe was the normal. Okay, cool. So now home, back to Dub Grub. Cool, we're back to normal. Allow once. And then we'll do the UI in a bit, but you see our tab bar is a little messed up. I think that's a UI bug, because when I go to locations and then come back, like the tab bar works fine. So again, bugs are going to be prevalent in the new, like when they first release, you're going to see this kind of stuff. But if I go to locations, Chipotle, you're already seeing a UI issue there as well. Click on dummy. Okay, cool. So the animation's still working. The overlay was our X dismiss button. So all that is working, good to go. Okay, so now that we've handled all the deprecations we're going to handle, and I say that because alert was deprecated. So let's go to profile view, right? And then this alert right here, how we're passing in the item. We basically architected our entire alert system around being able to pass in an alert item. Well, if you click on alert, you'll see this is deprecated. You got to use this. And to be honest with you, I dug into this a little bit and I couldn't necessarily find a clean way to use this new method. Because like, look how clean like this is, right? When we just pass in the alert item, it's one line, super clean at our call site. We abstracted it away. I'm sure there's a way to do that, but to be honest with you, it would require completely like restructuring our alerts and redoing that, at least upon my initial investigation. So I decided not to do that for this course because that might have been like 4 more videos just messing with alerts. And again, it also illustrates a good real life decision, right? If you have a real app and something gets deprecated, remember you have a couple years. Well, if you have a big app and all your alerts get deprecated, that's a big project to go through your entire app and restructure all your alerts. So that might be something that you take a wait and see approach, because maybe the community, or maybe you'll think of a good way to have a good system to utilize this new alert, kind of like what we have now. So that's why I didn't mess with that, but that, just so you know, that is deprecated, but it's a good example of how you don't have to do things like right away. And this would be a very big project. Now let's look at any UI issues, which you may have seen as I was running the app. So we'll run the app. And okay, so allow once. You saw that like launch screen super blown up Dub Grub. Sometimes that happens. It doesn't happen on my device. I don't know if it's a simulator thing. But anyways, okay, so like I mentioned, the new tab bar. This is actually the intended behavior, believe it or not. Well, kind of, for iOS 15. The way the new tab bar works now is it is completely clear, how you see here, unless there's content behind it. That's why I think this is a UI bug, because there's content behind it. So our profile view is an example when there's no content behind it, right? That is how it's actually supposed to look. That's the new iOS 15 style. Whereas if I go to my locations, okay, we'll come back to what the list looks. We'll come back to that. But look, now it's translucent because there's content behind it. Well, our map, well, now it's showing up as it's supposed to be. So our map screen, other than that, and again, I'm pretty sure that's going to be a UI bug, but we're going to leave it there and assume Apple's going to fix this UI bug. Because again, we are early in the iOS 15 release cycle. We're on 15.0. As you know, we're going to get 15.1, 15.2, 15.3 with bug fixes and updates. Okay, so this screen looks good. Again, we'll click on Chipotle. This is good. Cool. You know, we already messed with that. Good to go. I can check in. Yep, there's Sean, new avatar. Check out. That was me playing. Okay, cool. Dismiss. And basically the point here is I just go through the app and make sure everything is still working fine. So now when I come to locations, I'm like, okay, so this is now like, this list is inset. This is not the look I want. Maybe you do want this look, but you'd have to tweak your UI a little bit. I want to go back to the look we had because we're doing a lot in our cells, and I feel like I need all the screen real estate I can get. We'll come back to fix that, but that is an issue. Again, back to the detail screen. That looks fine. Profile, cool. Click on that. Do Command K to show the keyboard. Okay, that's still working fine. Still working fine. Dismiss keyboard. Cool. So like I said, I did a real cursory overview right now. If you had a real product, you would be going through this, again, with a magnifying glass, every little detail. But educational environment. So now really the only UI issue I have to fix is that list, right? This is not the way I want it to be. So let's stop running this. It's actually a relatively simple fix. We'll go to location list view, right? Where we have our list for the location list view. Here's all our modifiers. And I can just we'll do it under navigation title. I'll do .list style. And you can see grouped, inset group. We'll just do plain. Okay, that's the fix. Let's run it just to make sure. We'll hit allow once. And if I go to my location list, bam, that's how we wanted it. Again, we want as much screen real estate as possible because we're doing a lot of stuff in our cells. So that is now fixed. Cool, so that's the process, right? I run the app in iOS 15, clear out any deprecations and warnings, go through my deprecations list, double check, do a lot of work to get it to a clean slate, minus all these CloudKit warnings you see over here. We're gonna come back to that. And then I go through the UI, see if there's any weird UI issues, do my best to fix those. And the entire point of this initial run is to get the app to, like I keep saying, like a very good spot, a clean slate before I start adding the new iOS 15 stuff. And that's what we're gonna do in the next videos, so let's go. In this video, we're gonna implement the new location button into our app because it's actually like the perfect use case for this button. Let me explain. Our app doesn't always need the location, right? If you look at this screenshot, yeah, we're showing it, but the whole point of our app is like, here's all the eateries around WWDC, and here's who's checked in, right? Some people may not always want their location being tracked. It would be nice, maybe they're not familiar with the area, if on demand, you could say, okay, here's the map, where am I? They press a button, bam, it shows their location so they can see where they are relative to our locations. But again, maybe they're familiar because it's only like a couple blocks, right? Maybe they're familiar with the area. They just want to see who's checked in. So they don't want their location being tracked, right? Privacy issues. So our app is a perfect use case for the location button, which again is just that on demand, give me my location one time. We'll talk about some other benefits as we go, but let's start implementing it. So here I am in the location map view. The first thing we're gonna do is tweak our UI to show this button. So I'm gonna stop running the preview here. And okay, so let's think about the structure here, right? We have a Z-stack alignment top. That's what put our Dub Grub logo up top. So below this, we're gonna add our location button, right below the logo view. So well, first things first, I'll go back to the top. In order to get this core location button, well, we need the core location UI. That will give us access to the location button. So now if I go back down to where we were, I can do location button, initialize that, and you see we get a title and an action. So the title, now this is like specific to the location button. So if I do dot, right, current location, send my location, share location, right, we'll do dot current location. But the point is there's specific things you can do to this location button. It's not just like a free-for-all button, right? And you'll see it has very specific modifiers as well. Now the action, we'll do this later, button tapped, we'll come back and fix that. But let's start adding some modifiers onto this button. Well, before we do that, let's resume the preview to take a look at the button. It's gonna be right above our Dub Grub logo, by the way, right? Because everything is aligned to the top of the Z-stack. Of course, we're gonna fix that, but let's play with our button real quick. That's the default, right? The blue button, black letters, not what we want. So let's start playing around with some modifiers here. Let's do dot foreground color, dot white here, right? That'll make it white. Cool. Now let's say we want our arrow filled in. We don't like the outline of that. So we can do dot symbol variant, right? And you see there's a couple different ones, circle, fill, rectangle, slash, square. Sometimes some of them don't work, or maybe the thing is too small, but you have to play around with that. But we just want to do fill, right? I want to fill in that little arrow over here. So you can see now it's filled. And maybe we want to change the color, right? Make it more fit with our app here, right? So I can do dot tint, right? And here's where tint will work. Dot grub red to give us our pink color here. And then of course, we can give it, corner radius of like 8. If you can style the button a typical button, as you can see here, but we're actually going to do something different, right? If you wanted that button, cool. And by now, hopefully you know how to style buttons, but we're going to get a specific style here. So I'm going to do label style. And look, you can do icon only, title and icon. That's what we have now. Title only. I'm going to do icon only because I just want this to be a little circular button down in the left. So speaking of circular buttons, I can do dot clip shape with a circle there. Is this dot circle now? No. Sometimes they did a lot of this stuff where you had to initialize something. You can do dot now, but apparently not this one. So now this is the kind of button I want. Now let's change the location, right? So like I said, this putting it in our Z stack puts it, aligned top with our title. However, something new we can do, again, with the overlay, right? I can make this an overlay in the bottom left, right? Because I want it to be in the bottom left corner. So down here, we'll do it above the alert. I can do dot overlay. And remember the alignment content, this is the new one because the old overlay is deprecated. Well, alignment, I want to do dot bottom leading, right? I want it in the lower left. And then content, we can open and close our curly braces and we will just cut and paste our location button here. Because the other way we could have done it, we could have put it in a V stack with a spacer on the top to push it to the bottom, and then in an H stack with a spacer on the right to push it to the left. You know, that's just a lot of hassle. So we're going to use our overlay down here to put the button. And then because the alignment is bottom leading, there you go. However, it's a little too much. So I want to add some dot padding to it. Now it's still covering the maps a little bit, so I'm gonna really customize my padding with the edge insets. Scroll up a little bit. With edge insets, you can pass top, leading, bottom. So top, I don't care, I want 0. Leading, we'll do 20. I don't want it too far off the left. Bottom is what I really need, because I want to get it above that Apple Maps logo. So we'll do bottom 40, and then trailing 0. I don't need padding there. So there you go, I just moved it into the position. To be honest with you, I don't know why my arrow's not white. It was white in my testing. It kind of looks like it's like a faded white. Let me look and see what I'm doing here. All right, I'm not sure. This is literally the same code I had in my testing where it was white. Again, not sure what's going on there, but let's run the app and see if our button is there. Maybe when we run it on the actual simulator, it'll be white. Maybe the preview is just messing up a little bit. Allow once. Yeah, there it is. See, it's white. Again, be careful with previews. Like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with previews. I could have been pulling my hair out. It's already out, trying to figure out why that wasn't white, but look, it is white. So that is the style I want, right? Just this little button. So now that, well, let's go back to locations and map just to get our bar there, just to get the real look. So that's the look I want, right? So now we need to work on the functionality that when I press this button, it will show the dot, right? Because right now, you see the location pop up when we first run it. Like, let's do that again, because this is actually a good chance to explain the benefits or more of the benefits of location button, right? So the way our app was running before, we were asking for location like right away. And what happens is, I think I mentioned this before, right? If they hit don't allow, they got to go into the settings and find your app and then give you more permission. It's really a pain once they hit don't allow, like you're kind of screwed. So basically what the location button does is it gives allow once, but you'll see the prompt when we actually implement this, it says allow once or not now. So there's not a don't allow option. So you can kind of never get locked out. They're either going to constantly hit not now or allow, but there's a message saying that like only when you tap this button do they get the location, right? So it's a much nicer way to do this. So we're going to hit allow once for now. And now that our button is showing up, let's start working on the implementation. Now, we've gone back and forth on this, right? So we initially started off with our location stuff, I believe, in our, make some more room here, location view model, right? And then we ended up moving it to the app tab view model, right, where we did all this. Well, now we're gonna move it back to the location view because we moved it to the tab view because it was happening like on launch, right? The overall app. Well, now this only happens when they tap the location button, which is on our location map view. So we're moving this back because now it is tightly coupled with the button that is on that, which is a much better experience in my opinion. So let's start ripping code apart here, right? So location manager did change authorization. No, we're just getting the one-time authorization. We don't need that. Check location authorization. Again, we don't have not determined, restricted, denied, always. Like we just have the one. It's either allow once or not now. You'll see that coming up. So this is gone. Check if location services is enabled. We don't have to do that before we ask permission because we're only asking permission like when they tap the button. Okay, I'm probably going to mess up my curly braces here. Okay, so run startup checks. I don't need to see if location services is enabled, so I just need to delete the else. Now I still want to like show the onboard screen if I have to. So I'm going to make this a one-liner for cleanliness. So that still has to happen. Device location manager, that goes away. Basically, I'm deleting everything that has to do with location and leaving the onboard view stuff. So this alert item had to do with location errors. And then now I can delete core location. Deleting code is always so fun. Get rid of NSObject because the only reason we needed NSObject was because we were the CL location manager delegate. Cool. Now our app tab view is pretty basic. Let's go to that was the view model. I'm sorry. Let's go to the app tab view. I still want to get user record. I still want to run the startup checks, except let's change this name, right? Because run startup checks was when we were doing all that other stuff. Now the only thing we're doing is checking for the onboarding. So we'll say check if has seen onboard, right? We'll be very specific with that. So now when I go to my app tab view, it's not run startup checks, it's check if has seen onboard. And then you'll notice we're getting another errors. That's why I always do Command B a lot. It's a habit of mine. Now, of course, I'm working in a simple app where building the app doesn't take forever, but so that may not be feasible in huge apps, but here I can. So anyway, now I don't want to check if location services is enabled. Now I don't even do anything on dismiss, right? Because on dismiss of the onboarding screen, we were then running our location. Well, we're not doing that. We're only running the location when they tap the button. So I can get rid of all that code. So that really cleans up our app tab view. But back in our location map view, or location map view model, I'm sorry, here's where we're going to, basically do this location button logic. The first thing I want to do here in our location map view model is conform to CL location manager delegate, right? Same thing we had in our app tab view. And because we did this, we have to do NS object, right? We're just basically moving this back here. We've already done this. I don't believe I need to import core location because I'm importing mapkit, which imports that as well. So now that that's ready, now I need my variable of our device location manager. So say let device location manager equals, and we'll initialize a new CL location manager. Right? And again, this is the same stuff we had. We're just moving it over. A difference here is I need to set the delegate, and I want to set the delegate in the initializer. So I'll do override init. And anytime you override it, you definitely want to call the super.init. And then we'll do device location manager dot delegate equals self. So here I'm initializing the new core location manager. And then when we initialize the location map view model, we're setting the delegate right away. So now I need a function to request the location when they tap that button. And here's what we'll do. We'll do func request allow once location permission. I gotta like to be super specific, right? And this is pretty simple. It's device location manager dot request location. Now let's take a look into request location, right? So option, click on it, scroll down, open in developer documentation, see what this is all about. Here you go. Request the one-time delivery of the current user's location. That's what we want. I don't want to constantly be tracking the user's location, right? I'm not a hiking app where I want to, have the trail show up on the map. Just give me the current user's location so I can show it on the map to give them the context of where they are amongst our restaurants, right? Now, let's read a little bit further. This method returns immediately, cool. Calling it causes the location manager to obtain a location fix and call the location delegates location manager did update locations. And you see we also have did fail with error down here. So those are the two delegate methods we have to implement, right? Because did update location is how we get the location. So close out the documentation and let's implement those delegate methods here. I'll just type did update. Okay, see location manager, make sure you don't hit did update heading. That's what it defaults to did update locations. And you can see this returns an array of locations. However, ours, because we're only requesting a one time, it's only gonna have one item in it. And then like I said, we're gonna do did fail with error. So, okay, location manager did fail with error. And for now, we're gonna do print did fail with error. One thing I'm not going to do in this iOS 15 section is rewrite all the alerts for all this stuff. Maybe that's a good challenge for you. We've written tons of alerts throughout the entire course. So hopefully by now, you know how to basically use an alert on this stuff, right? And just to give you a refresher, right? It's that alert item, alert context, and then you would say, did fail with error on location manager or whatever, and then you write that alert in the alert section. But again, I'm trying to avoid the tedious stuff we've done 100 times by now and keep it focused on the new stuff. So that's the reason behind that. So location manager, now that we have an array of locations, which is only gonna hold one location, how do we get that? Well, we can do array.last to get the latest one. And remember, that's an optional because if an array is empty, there is no last item in the optional. You'll see what I mean. So I'm gonna unwrap that real quick. So guard let current location equal locations, and this is the array right here. This is what I'm getting into. So locations dot last, and you can see last is an optional because again, if there's nothing in there, there's nothing there. So we'll do else, and then I'm just going to return. Again, you would handle the error appropriately here. But now that we have current location, I can use that. So how we're going to use this is we're going to move the map to their location. Now, if you're doing this course and you're on the other side of the world or on the other side of the country, is going to be a bit of a weird behavior. So maybe in a real product, not sure if you'd want to do this, but we're assuming the person is in downtown San Jose when they're using this app so we can zoom to their location. That's the assumption here. But we'll do region equals, and we need a region, right? So that's that MK coordinate region where we pass in a coordinate and then the span, right? We've done that before. So the region we want to change this to is MK coordinate region, right, where it takes in a center and a span. So the center of the map is going to be our user's location, which we have here in current location. So current location dot coordinate. And you can see some of the other stuff that's on location that's pretty cool, right? Altitude, course, speed, time, there's a whole lot of cool stuff you can do with core location that we're just barely scratching the surface. But we just want the coordinate. And then the span is the same span we have here, actually. So I'm going to copy that and paste that there. Right? Because we don't want maybe you do want it to zoom in even more. Maybe you want it to zoom out. You could play with that if you want, but we're going to keep the same span. So right now this is just going to snap to it. But remember that handy dandy with animation that we were using before? So now we just do with animation, and then we'll cut the region there, paste it there. So let me walk through this real quick, right? We've set up our same old device location manager. In the initializer, we're setting the delegate to self. The reason we have to set the delegate is because we're using delegate methods, right? The did update locations and did fail with error. So we have to make sure you set the delegate. Done. And then when our button is tapped, which we haven't done yet, we are going to call request allow once location permission. That is going to call request location, which again, like we said in the documentation, that triggers off this did update locations. So that'll trigger off did update locations with the one location in the array. Here we are digging into that array, getting that one location, making sure it's there. And again, you would handle the error if it's not there. And then once we have that location, we are updating our region, which again, back our region, right, is a published property. So that means the UI will update. And we update the region with a new coordinate region that is based on our current locations, right? Our user's locations coordinate. Now, and then with animation, the camera will like pan to the location. It'll look nice when they're in San Jose. It'll look pretty weird if the map has to zoom all the way to like India, just as a warning, if that's where your location is. So let's go to our location map view and trigger this whole chain of events. And that's what we do when the location button is tapped. Now, the first time this is tapped, we'll get that prompt that you'll see. Once they hit allow, they're not going to see that prompt every time. That prompt is just for the first time. So we'll do view model dot request allow once location permission. Again, that's when they tap our location button. So let's run this. Cool. You see, we don't have our location, right? Well, you'll notice location permission didn't pop up like we had before. We're not showing our location, which was usually right here, and we just have our location button. Again, I'm going to go to locations and map. That tab bar drives me nuts. I hope they fix that bug pretty quickly. Anyway, now you can see the use case, right? I come in, I open the app. I don't want my location tracked all the time. Maybe I just want to see who's at Chipotle, right? Okay, cool. I know where I'm at, right? It's a small area. But again, if you do want to know where you're at, right now you have the option to click this button and you see this is the prompt, right? Dub Grub can only access your location when you choose to share it. And you see okay or not now. So when they hit okay, we're only going to get their location when they tap the button. They're not going to see this prompt ever again. If they hit not now, then they're going to see this prompt every time they tap the button. All right, so let's hit okay. And you can see our location showed up. Our tab bar went away. Drives me nuts. So see, no location. Now let's stop running this, run it again. And you're going to see no location showing up. Now when we tap the button, the dot should just appear. We're not going to get that prompt. So you tap the button, the dot appears, and the camera moved over. So the animation is not working when the prompt shows up, but it'll work on every subsequent time, right? So if I scroll here, tap the button, boom, zooms into the location and shows it. Because it's already showing, it's not going to show it again, obviously, but you tap the button, it'll at least zoom in on it. So that is how we use our location button. And again, the tab bar keeps going away every time I tap that. UI bug, I think. Anyway, again, like I said, it's a perfect use case for our app. When, we don't want to get the location every time. It's good for privacy. We're only getting it when we need it. And it's only allow once permission. We're not getting it every time. So that is a great use case for the location button. New in iOS 15.